We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. My name is Rob H. I'm your host this week, and I am here with
Lee Overstreet. I used to say occasional pinch hitter, becoming a bit more frequent lately. I feel like I've seen Rob a few times recently, so once again, pinch hitting. Tom was unable to join us.
That's right. We tried to make it work, but hey, it is the very first AV Rant podcast of 2019, and since Monday, our normal recording night fell on New Year's Eve, that wasn't happening. And then New Year's Day was the Tuesday, and we sometimes record then, but it was New Year's Day. It was New Year's Day. And
I was eating black eyed peas. That's a Southern tradition. You have to eat black eyed peas on New Year's Day.
We kind of record in the morning, like fairly early in the morning on Tuesdays if we do that. So... Yeah, that didn't happen. So Tom's kids are still home from school and that. So we're recording this on a Wednesday, which is odd for us. But thankfully, Lee was able to join me. And so we are going to have episode number 624, the very first of 2019 AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And we will be answering questions today. We got a whole backlog. We'll try and get through a bunch. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, going to be good. First up, I want to say... Yeah. I want to say thank you to Lee for being our honored guest on episode number 623, which did post as our last episode of 2018. Although, Tom didn't get that up until the new year.
Yeah,
even though it was
that's
pre-recorded.
Okay. That was fun, though, and already I've got a couple of folks I've sort of chatted back and forth with about old analog issues, analog video issues, and getting your camcorder tapes onto the computer. And if you didn't hear that, go back and listen if that's a thing you like. Oh, wait.
Yes, it was converting analog videotapes to digital.
Look what I have on the video. Anybody watching the YouTube, this is some of my home videos in the late 80s, early 90s were actually recorded on this very Panasonic VHS camcorder. So isn't that fun?
That is the full VHS tapes that go in there, yeah?
Yes, it is. And that particular one, I couldn't believe it. It actually turns on and focuses. I haven't tried recording a tape yet, but it's so far it might actually work. Of course, the battery's dead. But anyway, fun with old analog. Let's come back into the future. It's 2019.
Let's shall, yes. And since we do answer home theater and AV questions here, you can send your questions to I already screwed that up.
No, you already screwed up. Yeah.
Question@avrant.com. There you go. That's how we're going to start this year. It's auspicious. Question@avrant.com. That's our email address. Please do send your questions there. That is by far the best way to get them onto the show. You can, however, contact us in some other ways. Now, avrant.com is our website, so you can, of course, come over there. I think the comments are working. We did a test. It worked for Tom and I, but we are administrators, so one never knows. But avrant.com, that is our website. You can check us out there. And then you can also reach us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/avrant podcast. And you can find us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/avrant. And you can reach us individually. I am Rob at avrant.com. Tom is Tom at avrant.com. And we're available on Twitter as well. I am at First Reflect. Tom is at avrant_Tom. And folks can reach Lee on Twitter as well, right?
You sure can. It's at Lee Overtweet.
There you go.
It's pretty straightforward.
At
and
Lee
people
Overtweet.
have, and it's really neat. Sometimes I forget that this is a thing and people hear it and see it. And then sometimes I'm reminded, oh, that's right. Yeah. Listeners.
Nice.
It's a wild concept.
Well, I'll let folks know at the beginning here, we like to thank our listeners of the week, who are people who have supported the podcast in some way. And one of the ways you can do that is come to avrant.com, our website, and over on the right-hand side, you'll see a little graphic. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a AVRant logo. Below that, you'll see our Patreon link, which I'll talk about next. And below that, there is a thing that says support the podcast or support AV Rant, and there's a picture of a cup of coffee, and that will take you to PayPal. And you do not have to have a PayPal account to use that. You can just use a credit card without a PayPal account, or of course you can use your PayPal account if you'd like to. That's the way to give us a one-time donation. Tom hasn't updated that list, so I don't know. I'm betting some people gave us some PayPal donations,
Maybe
but I
so.
don't have access
It was
to
the
that
holidays
list.
recently,
It was the
so
holidays.
probably somebody did, and we thank you for that. It's not necessarily a cup of coffee that you're buying, but it's helping the show continue.
Absolutely. So thank you to everyone who did support us on PayPal. We will get your names mentioned next week when Tom is back. You can also support us financially on Patreon if you'd like to. That is an automatic monthly donation. So you enter the amount that you would automatically like to give every single month, and Patreon will take care of that. We have 73 patrons over there, including Gib G, who is one of our patrons. So thank you so much for that financial support.
Thank you, Gib, and everyone that donates.
Yes, and you don't have to support us financially, although this is also kind of financial. Before Christmas, we thanked James C because I received an Amazon gift card from him as a Christmas present.
What?
And Tom wasn't sure if he got one. Well, it turned out it was in his spam folder. So James did send Tom an Amazon e-gift card as well. So thank you to James
for sending us
both
Maybe I need to give out my email address. I got a birthday coming up. I should give out leeoverstreet@yahoo.com.
Just in passing. That just went out there.
Did I say my email address
Whoops.
and the fact that my birthday's coming up in less than a month?
Well, that's thank you to very much to all to our listeners of the week for supporting the podcast. Let's see. We're going to jump into the news. Do you want me to read the news, or are you reading the news?
I will be happy to read the news.
Well, there we go.
I'm a reading machine. Mark from Accessories for Less wrote to let us know that the end has come for the Focal Bird Series speakers.
Mm-hmm.
What? He says our frequent recommendations really did help bring attention and sales of those particular speakers, and apparently ruined it.
Well, no, I mean, they were discontinued years ago. So I've been saying all along, I'm surprised that they were still available for as long as they were. But
I'd like to think this podcast finally emptied it out.
I think it was us.
So there's no more stock. No more stock to be had, and there's just a few last sets of Superbirds remaining. Mm-hmm. So there's that. But he's got a potential alternative, at least for the little birds. He says he bought out all the remaining inventory of Boston Acoustics A-Series speakers, including their SoundWare 4.5 Flex speakers, which offer a 4.5-inch woofer, 3/4-inch tweeter, and a compact design with a ball-jointed wall mount built in, very much like the little birds. That is a very similar thing.
That's right. These are a good similar alternative. They're selling them right now for buy one, get one half off. So the total for a pair of these right now is $105 over at Accessories for Less. Now, if you're looking at the images on YouTube, these look like they're really small, like little computer speakers or something, but much like the Focal Little Bird speakers, they are bigger than you might think, because that is a 4.5-inch woofer in there. So that's not some tiny little 2-inch driver that you're looking at. That is a 4.5-inch driver in there. So keep in mind, do look at the specs to get the sizes. But yeah, that's going to be a nice alternative. We have long been fans of Boston Acoustics A-Series speakers. It's just that there were other speakers like the ALEC Debut series or the Pioneer Andrew Jones speakers that offered similar levels of performance at an even lower price point. So we didn't often mention the Boston Acoustics, but when they're coming from Accessories for Less, now they're in that exact same price point. I think they're like a hair above the Pioneer Andrew Jones, but a hair below the ELAC Debut 2.0.
Okay.
So
the Andrew Jones Pioneer ones have always hovered around $100, right?
Yeah, they were $130 each for the towers, or $130 for a pair of the bookshelves. These are going like they're around $150, so they're like a little bit more, but that's a little bit less than the ELAC Debut 2. So Boston Acoustics A-Series, Mark over there at Accessories for Less, he's bought up a huge stockpile of them. They're at a really good price. They're good performers. They're right in there with that sort of ELAC Debut level, in my opinion, performance-wise. So yeah, have a look at those. And yeah, we're happy to see that those SoundWare 4.5s are available as well.
Okay, some news from our friends at Oppo. They released a new beta firmware for their discontinued Ultra HD Blu-ray players. It adds HDR10 Plus and also lets you set the HDMI input to bypass so that Dolby Vision signals can get through now. Pioneer also announced they'll add HDR10 Plus support to their Ultra HD Blu-ray players that already support Dolby Vision, but not until spring of this year. That's 2019. Hey, new year. And TCL also joined the HDR10 Plus initiative, so they might have the first TVs with both dynamic metadata HDR formats. So, is this normally things shake out quickly when you have kind of a format war. It seems like this is interesting to me. that HDR10 plus, everybody's going, oh, wait, we got that too. Oh, wait, we got that too. Is there a reason for this, or is this just wanting to add the one last little thing?
I mean, it's kind of just the checklist thing now. I mean, all along, people who've been really into this have been saying it's not really a format war,
right?
Because unlike when it was, say, a true format war like Blu-ray versus HD DVD, in that instance, if you took an HD DVD disc and put it into a Blu-ray player, you got nothing, and vice versa, right? You take a Blu-ray disc, put it in an HD DVD player, you got nothing. In the case of Dolby Vision, if you take a Dolby Vision disc and put it into an Ultra HD Blu-ray player that doesn't support Dolby Vision, or play it on a TV that doesn't support Dolby Vision, it's not like you get nothing, you just get baseline HDR10. And if you take an HDR10 plus disc, or and play that on a TV that, or a player that doesn't support HDR10 plus, same thing, you get baseline HDR10. So it's not the instance where you're getting nothing. So that's why they say it's not really a format war, it's more like an extra, an alternative. So now these companies are just like, you know what, we're just going to support it all. And interesting that...
as well, you're just adding software, basically. And then there's that whole issue of what you and I talked about where maybe none of it's necessary anyway.
That's right. If your TV does good dynamic HDR of its own, where it ignores the metadata altogether, then it's all kind of moot. So interesting that TCL is probably going to be the first brand that'll support both as far as televisions go. Sony and LG are just sticking with Dolby Vision because both of them now do dynamic HDR of their own, ignoring the HDR10 metadata and just analyzing it frame by frame inside the TV itself. So but it's all coming along. There are a couple of HDR10 plus discs available now. Those are the IMAX enhanced discs. So there actually is HDR10 plus content, and now there's more than one player that can play it. The Panasonic players can play it, and now the Oppo can play it as well, and the Pioneers will in the near future.
I look forward to some comparisons between the various ways of doing this.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very complicated.
It's going to be
so many apples to oranges, apples to blood oranges, apples to mandarins. It's going to be so confusing. Just buy a very good television, and that gets you past all of it. All right, so LG has some interesting tidbits ahead of CES 2019. They might show a 21:9 TV with motorized speakers on the sides that can move in and out to change the TV's aspect ratio. So the speakers cover the screen. That's
the speakers
interesting.
Are like motorized masking. So if you've seen motorized masking on a projection screen where you have masks that move in and out on the sides to change the aspect ratio, this is the very same idea, except they're like, well, why don't we make those masks into some speakers, and we'll start with it as 21:9, which is not quite 2.35 to 1. It's not quite that wide, but it's close. And then the speakers can move in to mask it down to 16:9 and move in even further to mask it down to 4:3. So they've shown sort of that idea. Whether or not it'll actually be a product, who knows, but it was teased.
It's neato, but then again, if you're in a situation where those different aspect ratios matter to you, I don't know that you care about the speakers built into the TV.
So, it's killing two birds with one stone, so why not?
I guess. So, but I don't know. That's a small crowd that wants the wide screen and the different aspect ratios, but only wants built-in speakers. I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. Also, LG will once again show their rollable OLED, which I guess Rob is calling ROLED.
That's what I want to call it. I want that to catch on. Vincent Teo called it that, so I'm like, it's ROLED. Why not? It's OLED, so if it rolls, it's ROLED.
It sounds too much like an antacid, man. I don't know. Take your ROLED and you'll feel better. So it might actually be for sale later this year. This is another one of those things that I think is amazing, but does it make a big difference? Do I ever want to reach up and roll my television? Isn't it just sitting there forever?
I mean, so of course some people are like, oh, this could replace a retractable projection screen, but they're not in that sort of size range yet. But where I'm thinking this does make a lot of sense is there are plenty of people who are like, my significant other or myself, I don't want a TV visible in this room. It's a sitting room. I don't want a TV that's just, a big black rectangle on the wall. Samsung tried to say, oh, well, we can just leave it kind of on all the time and turn it into artwork, or almost like a pass-through where you can, take a picture of the wall that's behind the TV and then the TV shows that, so it's almost like it's transparent. But this is one way where you could have a TV completely hidden out of view inside of its box, and then it just rolls its way up when it's time to use it and rolls back down.
Okay, so a little like a projection screen that rolls up, except there is no projector.
That's
So
right.
I can see that. But at first, it's going to be a pretty thick box because this thing isn't rolling up into like a little tiny paper towel.
No, it has to
roll.
be fairly wide roller because otherwise you're going to damage something.
So again, we're looking at a small sliver of people who don't want to see the TV, but don't mind seeing a big square box that looks like you have tinfoil dispenser.
I don't know. I mean, you could, you could probably dress that up pretty nice.
Maybe so. Maybe. All right, continue on. They've got sound bars that finally support DTS:X in addition to Atmos. And they'll show their HU85L ultra short throw 4K laser projector. Now, that's kind of cool.
That's all the things, although price wasn't announced, so hoping that it'll be less than like Sony's $25,000 offering, but one never knows. So we'll find out how much it costs at CES, hopefully.
On the YouTube part of this, we're showing a picture that looks pretty cool. The projector is extremely close to the wall, right?
That's right. Yeah, you got like a table up front, right next to your front wall, and then the projector could just sit on top of that table, much like a center speaker might. And it can throw. What were they saying? It takes like 9 inches to throw a 100-inch image or something like that.
That's incredible. Yeah. Now this, I'm on board with. I can imagine a lot of people who wouldn't mind the giant screen, and then it goes away because the projector is just sitting on a coffee table-like structure. In the front of the room. Now that could be very cool.
Ultra short throw is attractive. It's just, for the time being, getting the 4K resolution and HDR support, the price has been higher. So there's always that to consider, but it's coming along. It's coming along.
Lasers. Dirac is going to start offering modules to add more features to Dirac Live. The first one announced is for automatically integrating multiple subwoofers and providing predictive results to visually show you what your response might look like without having to actually play test tones multiple times and measure every single change. Huh. But where's the fun in that without spending all day just measuring and changing and crawling around, the whole subwoofer.
And it is still just a prediction, so occasionally things don't always come out exactly as predicted. And yeah, I haven't seen the exact method they're using for the multiple subwoofer. There are, of course, various theories out there about the best way to measure and then integrate multiple subs. So I haven't seen the exact details on that, but good to see that this is coming along. Always happy to see more advanced EQ and processing being added to programs like that. And yeah, Dirac Live, we're seeing it on more and more brands now. So keep an eye out for that. It'll be showing it at CES as well. Right
on. Forbes magazine covered the latest OLED TVs aren't perfect, so that means they're garbage freak out. This time, people are reporting a weird flashing as some content fades to black. And it only seems to be happening on 2018 LG OLED TVs. Weirdly, this didn't coincide with any firmware update, and other TVs that use the same 2018 panels like Sony, Panasonic, etc. don't show it. So it seems to be a software bug just on the LGs, which I believe because, there's that one thing where I couldn't watch my 60 frame per second videos in the YouTube app. So somebody does funky little software problems there at LG occasionally is my theory. Naturally, Vincent Teo from HDTV Test was on top of it. And we will link to a YouTube video that person has done. He authored his own test pattern and found what seems to be a chroma bug that's only tripped when content is authored a certain way. And he informed LG, and they're hoping to issue a fix. Boy, that's another very specific bug. Really specific. So it has to be authored a certain way. Do we know what that certain way is, or does it matter at this point?
I mean, it's only in the chroma channel, so it's only in the color difference parts of the signal, and it's like if it's a hair above black, then it overshoots the chroma signal and you get this little flash as you're going to your fade to black. But it's not on everything. There's plenty of fades to black where it looks fine. So I mean, it's an odd little thing. Yeah, it could be slightly annoying. I don't blame people for seeing that, and people want these things to be perfect because they're so tantalizingly close. But stuff
that's what happened to me when I had that OLED for a little while. I just I needed it to be 110%, and it was 99%, and I freaked out. So anyway, maybe they'll figure that out. This kind of thing's gonna happen.
I mean,
more and more in the future.
They got the fix for the like what looked like light pumping. You're switching between an overall bright scene to an overall dark scene, and it took like a fraction of a second for the overall thing to go down, so you could see the whole image kind of pump in light a little bit. But they got that fixed. So are Sony programmers better than LG programmers? Who knows?
I mean, that's a real thing, right? Because the panel's the same. Maybe
the panel
Sony
is the same. yeah, the actual physical thing is the same. It's the software behind it. But hopefully it gets fixed. LG has been very responsive to this stuff, so.
That's why I'm just still waiting a little bit longer. So some comments now. And Austin with an E is commenting. He still has, that's Austin Pond, has some QSC USA 850 amplifiers for sale. Price is negotiable. You can email question@avrant.com or ping Austin on Twitter @AustinPond. That's Austin with an E if you'd like to inquire. And YouTube is seeing a picture of said amps.
That's right. These are professional stereo amplifiers. And offering them at a good price. He got them from the theater where he was working at. So happy to help Austin out. Hopefully he gets those sold.
Yeah. All right. McMansion Chris, I do like his nickname we've given him, says, thanks for explaining the subwoofer level adjust setting in his Marantz receiver that seemingly woke up his dual PC-12 plus subwoofers. And we were correct. His subwoofer trim levels were set to -5 dB. So the subwoofer level adjust overriding that and putting the trim level back to 0 dB. There you go. Wait a minute. Sorry, I'm not reading correctly. Let's just start that sentence over again. There was a page break and my eyes just stopped. So the subwoofer level adjust overriding that and putting the trim level back to 0 dB by default is what increased the output, but also created some new boominess. He adjusted the output level so that it's basically at -2 dB now instead of -5 dB, and it's pretty close to perfect. Almost no boominess, but more tactile feel than he had before. Man, isn't that nice when you get it adjusted? You solve a problem. Some more comments here. Earl also commented on the exact same topic and came to the exact same conclusion. He likes to bump the Odyssey trim level results for his dual SB16 Ultra subwoofers up by 3 dB after it's done. And that's always okay.
Many people do. We are not against that whatsoever. It is totally fine. Odyssey is aiming for flat. And a lot of people, believe and agree that there should be a slight rise in the deep bass. That's what our ear is kind of expecting. It's what we expect from room gain anyway. It's what would happen if there weren't any equalization just naturally. So, yeah, I'm totally fine with that. And if you're more pleased with it, knock yourself out. That's
why the adjustments are there. The goal is to enjoy yourself. Never forget. You want to start with accuracy, and then you can take some poetic license from that. Chris P. has some advice when using Amazon Prime Video. He says that from the start screen, if you navigate up to where you can browse by category, you can scroll down to find HDR and Atmos as categories. Set those as favorites, and now when you search for titles, if there's an HDR and or Atmos version, it should bring those to the top. That's very cool.
Yep.
Also, if you're viewing any season of a TV show, move the cursor up to the top and highlight the back arrow. You should then be able to select other seasons to find the rest of the seasons for that show. Nice.
So I very much appreciate that, Chris. I mean, it's helpful to know that there are ways to better navigate around Amazon. I still wish you didn't have to know almost a secret way of doing this stuff. Again, if you go to Netflix, you search for a title, often the title pops up and whatever version is best is what automatically plays. That would be nice. That's
not necessarily what you want.
Instead of there being separate versions, like here's the SD version, here's the HD version, here's the HDR version. But whatever, at least I appreciate that there are some better ways to navigate Amazon Prime. So thank you, Chris, for those tips.
All right. Ted M. was getting really bad distortion from his record player. Rob was no help via Twitter. Dang it, Rob. So he went to a local record shop, since those exist now, again. Turned out his cartridge was misaligned.
Now, see, I said the needle might be misaligned, and he was like, nope, not that. It was the cartridge was misaligned. I'm like, I wasn't that far off.
Yeah, I'm going to give you credit. I'm going to give you about 75% credit for that. Those are two different things, but one kind of.
I wasn't way out to lunch, but no, I mean, record players are not my area of expertise. It's awesome that there was a local record shop that he could go to. Those disappeared for quite a few years, and now they're back. So yeah, that's good. He got it fixed. That's great.
Even in our little town, we have a record shop you can go to, and they'll talk your ear off about it. It's really cool. And in his theater, he finally got his imaging sounding right with his Legacy Silhouette on-wall speakers. He swapped his futon out for a couch and pushed the listening position a foot forward. No amount of angling or moving the speakers on the wall did the trick, so moving the seats did it. And now that he's closer, he went with a 77-inch OLED instead of a projection setup. Merry Christmas indeed. That sounds great. First of all, a 77-inch OLED, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And and simultaneously getting rid of a futon. Hey, congratulations on leaving college. You got rid of the futon.
It did make sense for his setup because it's a fairly small space that he's working with, and he still wanted 2 rows of seats, so it all worked. But yeah, this is one of those. I mean, we've been going back and forth with Ted for months on end trying to get this right, and it's like, for whatever reason, exactly where he was just happened to be the perfectly wrong distance for those speakers on the wall. It's like, this is some of the room acoustic stuff. For whatever reason, he was getting some kind of sound wave cancellation right at that spot that was just mucking up his imaging, and moving a foot forward fixed the problem.
There you go. Yeah, weird things can happen. And sometimes you just got to move the thing you didn't think you were going to move.
That is unfortunately just how it goes sometimes.
Right. But hey, yeah, indeed. Merry Christmas. Damien D on Twitter let us know that there really is some 7.1 Dolby Digital Plus streaming content that isn't Atmos. Black Panther on iTunes is one example, and he posts the info for us to look at. If you're looking at the YouTube video, you will see. And there
it is. It's Dolby Digital Plus 7.1. So yes, we were wondering how much 7.1 content there is via streaming, because we were trying to find an HDMI audio extractor, and we're like, well, there's the ones that do optical, but those would be limited to 5.1, and then if you want to find one that actually has an HDMI only audio output, the price goes up significantly, and we're like, how useful is that really if you don't have an Atmos setup? So yeah, Damien's just letting us know there is some 7.1, actual 7.1, not 5.1 content out there, but it's kind of few and far between, so.
Right on. So now it's time for questions.
It is indeed. We had a backlog of news and comments, so that gets taken care of too here on the first show of 2019.
That's right. We're wrapping things. You know, this time of year, honestly, every single year I've taken to just start cleaning things up.
Mm-hmm.
And just trying to, if you look at my office, if I turned to this camera around, you'd be so embarrassed for me. It's bad in here. So moving on to questions, let's get going. Monty N and his family found a rental place. This was after the California wildfires, and Monty getting some suggestions from us about what gear to buy with his insurance funding. There you go. He's quite happy with the idea of starting with a 2.1 audio setup plus an OLED TV, which they can use in their rental place right now, and then move into their master bedroom in a few years when they've rebuilt. We had suggested going with a Marantz Slimline Receiver, a pair of RBH Impression Elite or Ascend Sierra 2 speakers, depending on budget, an SVS SB-2000 subwoofer, and an OLED to replace his plasma TV, which is kind of what I'm going to have to do. You can't go plasma to LCD.
It doesn't seem, nope.
No, you're not going to do it. It ain't going to look right. The rental place is open concept, so the living room and kitchen are roughly 14 by 28 by 8, plus some more space for the hallway and entrance. His budget for everything is right around $5,000. So do these details change any of our recommendations? And which OLED should he get, LG B8 or C8? Okay.
So we're seeing the space. Yeah, and I mean, even though, so it's somewhat open concept, so base-wise, you know, you if this were the permanent room, that would be a consideration. But it doesn't look as though whatever setup he uses in this living room, he's going to be tremendously far away from his speakers.
Never really. No.
Yeah, that's not going to be the case. So I don't think it really changes any of the recommendations that we give. I'd still get a Marantz Slimline. That's going to be great, especially for the future bedroom. Now, whether you go SB-2000 or the only alternative I would point you to would be a PC-2000, the cylinder, because that's going to be the ported, that's going to have more output, it will handle this larger room size. I don't know what your future master bedroom is going to be, but a cylinder is often easier to place than a big box. But I would stick with one of those two, either the smaller sealed box, which will still be totally fine in this space. It might not fully pressurize your current rental, but you probably don't want to anyway. It's a rental, or a PC-2000, but those are right in the same ballpark. Now, the speakers with a $5,000 budget, right? So you're going to spend around $2,500 on your 65-inch OLED. You're going to spend around $500 on your Marantz, so that's around $3,000 right there. You're going to be spending $700 or $800 on the subwoofer. Either way, whether it's the SB-2000 or the PC-2000, now you would, in that case, still have enough money left over to get a pair of Ascend Sierra 2s.
You would, yeah. You still got $1,200 or so at that point, right?
That's right, and they're still on sale right now. The holiday sales that's unusual for Sierra 2s to be on sale, but they're at basically about $12.50 right now. So the pricing all works out exactly. If you want to save money, I would still highly recommend the RBH Impression Elite Series speakers. I got zero problem continuing to recommend those. So yeah, no big change there. The question of should you get a B8 or a C8 in the OLED? Now the major feature, the one major difference. So most people will know they have different processors. The B8 uses essentially last year's Alpha 7 processor, and the C8 and above use this year's Alpha 9 processor. But what does that actually get you? Does it make any difference? If you are a professional calibrator, it makes a difference, but that's not going to be most people because it gives you more points of calibration that you can do in the color section on the Alpha 9 processor, but that's not tremendously important there. The major feature is that the C8 and above have some people call it a decontouring filter, or it's to get rid of color banding, basically. Okay. It's hidden within the MPEG noise menu for some reason. You turn that on low and it activates the contouring filter or the getting rid of color banding filter.
Can you describe the type of image that would show you the color banding in question?
Sure. If you're looking at, say, a bright blue sky, you might notice that instead of being a nice, even, smooth blue sky, that there's like little bands of different shades of blue.
I still see that on my old plasma.
Yep, that happens. So this, it's not perfect. It's just a filter. But it reduces that. So that's the thing. The B8 doesn't have that. The C8 does, and so do the E8 and the W8. So if you were going to spend the approximately $200 more to get the C8 over the B8, that would be the feature that you might see as a regular user. There is one other difference, was that both of them can accept 120 hertz input signals, but only via the USB input or only via the built-in streaming, not via the HDMI connection. So if you're somehow putting in things, via streaming or via the USB input that are 120 hertz, the C8 can do 120 hertz and HDR at the same time, whereas the B8 can do 120 hertz or HDR, but not both at the same time.
Yeah, you are not going to run across much of that anytime soon. So there's no app differences between those two models?
Nope. There's no app differences. Support all the same stuff. Look almost identical. So it really is $200 worth it to you for that decontouring filter. That's pretty much the question.
Yeah, that would help with some images, but not much.
Right.
So maybe if you really want the very, very best. All right, some more questions from Monty. His former Ultra HD Blu-ray player was an Oppo 203. He knows the Panasonic UB820 is sort of the new go-to, and it's a similar price to what the Oppo 203 used to sell for, but does he really need all that? If he wanted to spend less, what's the second best Ultra HD Blu-ray player? And I understand that logic, yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's kind of tricky. I wish there were a really good option that cost less and also did Dolby Vision well. Because really there's the LG, but the LG I can't recommend the LG's Ultra HD Blu-ray players. They're Fisher-Price quality in terms of the build quality, and they do a weird thing where if you want 24 hertz output, then you can't have 60 hertz output unless you manually go into its settings menu and change it to 60, and then you can't have 24. It won't automatically switch between the two frame rates.
Wow, that's weird.
In 2019, they can't get that right. And then Sony has their X700, but if you turn Dolby Vision on in the X700, then everything comes out as Dolby Vision, even though the original source signal wasn't. And if you turn off Dolby Vision, then Dolby Vision doesn't go through. So you have to know whether your disc is Dolby Vision and manually turn it on beforehand.
But if your disc isn't Dolby Vision and Dolby Vision is turned on that Sony player, what does it do to the image? Yeah,
your TV goes into Dolby Vision mode, but is not getting a Dolby Vision signal.
So would that look the same as if it just got a non-Dolby Vision image?
It pretty much just looks like HDR10, but in the case of an LG OLED, now your dynamic HDR inside of the TV will be turned off because that gets turned off when it goes into Dolby Vision mode. So I can't really recommend either of those all that highly. What I would recommend, since you, Monty, are going to get an LG OLED, is get a Sony X800 because that's got very nice build quality. It's a universal player like the Oppo 203 was. If you've got SACDs or DVD audio discs, that'll play them. But it's just a really solid player at a nice price. It doesn't do Dolby Vision, but you know what? You've got the dynamic HDR built into your OLED, so everything will be HDR10, but it still looks great. So that would be my recommendation.
In the future, we're going to be talking talking about the old HDR formats, and wasn't that funny? We thought we needed all those.
Yep.
So if your TV's good, just get the Sony he mentioned. What's the price
I think the
of that
X800 from Sony. That's the one I would get myself. Yeah.
About how much is that X800?
About $250.
There we go. All right, moving on to Christian L. Christian is the fellow who mentioned that he works at Best Buy, and he was looking for a big subwoofer upgrade plus some surround speakers in his room that has a permanent opening. We had suggested an SVS PC-2000 cylinder sub and the Monoprice premium satellite speakers since he was working with a strict budget. He liked all our advice, but the Monoprice premium speakers are out of stock with no estimated ETA for when they'll be available again, and he also couldn't help but be enticed by the new SVS 3000 series. So here come the questions. If he didn't buy any surrounds at all, and he went $150 over budget, he could get the SB-3000 instead of the PC-2000. He's mostly concerned with deep bass output from movies, so what's our recommendation? He's a little bit worried about port chuffing, so might the sealed SB-3000 be better? It sounds like he thinks he's going to be blasting holes in the wall with his bass. You know what I mean? Like,
yes, and I really feel like many people overestimate how much bass output they will genuinely use.
You're right.
Which I don't blame anybody. You got, your eyes are sometimes bigger, right?
Yeah, it's like when I'm filling a plate of food at the holidays, right?
That's right.
It's just mounded up like the Superdome on my plate, and then my stomach is mounded up like the Superdome after. But yeah, I don't know that that's such a concern.
No, I mean, so the simple answer that I'm going to give is stick with the PC-2000.
Yeah.
It fits what you need. In a case where you have an open space, it's not an enclosed room, you're essentially letting that bass out into the entire rest of your house. What you're hoping to have is linear output down to 20 hertz. You don't want it to start rolling off up at 30 or 35 hertz and counting on room gain, which would totally work in an enclosed room.
Yeah.
But in an open room where that bass is going all throughout your house, you want linear response right down to 20 hertz, and the ported models will give you that. Now, the PB-3000, of course, could also do that, but that's a monstrous box and significantly more expensive. It's
Even
another
more, yeah.
$400 on top of already having gone $150 over your original budget. No, I will definitely tell you to stick with the PC-2000 in this case. It's got the linear output. Can the SB-3000 get even a little bit louder up in the 50 to 80 hertz range? Yes, it can. It's got the larger driver, it's got the more powerful amplifier, and up in that range, the port isn't contributing very much. So it's just about the driver and amplifier basically up in that 50 to 80 hertz range. And yes, the SB-3000 can get even a little bit louder, but no, the PC-2000 is the right choice here.
I wouldn't want to give up buying the surrounds.
No, yeah, there's that too. Yeah. So
because that's what he placed as his choice. If he didn't buy surrounds, it's not worth it.
And worrying about port chuffing, port chuffing can be a thing on some subwoofers. Yes, the port makes noise. On the SVS subwoofers, no. Technically, is the port making any noise that isn't exactly what the signal said to play? Yeah, but at that point, everything else is so loud that it's completely masked. You will absolutely never hear port noise.
Surely something else in your room is chuffing harder. Yeah. You know what I mean? Your pants leg is chuffing at that point.
So I'm sticking with that PC-2000 recommendation here for you, Christian.
All right, Christian's got a little bit more questioning to do here. He's decided against the $50 a pair JBL N24 satellites he was considering at first, and the Monoprice premium satellites, also $50 a pair, aren't available right now. The Polk T15 satellites were also available to him for the same price, but he hated those when he heard them. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good reason not to go with those.
That's a big no right there. So he found a couple more options in the Mica. Do they call those Mica? Okay, Mica, even though it's two C's. It looks like Mica. MB42 and the Dayton MK402. He wants a very compact size if possible, and he'd like to know if the surround speakers having a different impedance rating than his JBL front speakers is anything to be concerned about. Thoughts? I would say no.
Yeah, in this case, these mention that they dip down to 4 ohms, like the Dayton MK402s are actually rated at 4 ohms, and they dip down to 3.2, and his JBL front speakers are 8 ohm rated and dip down to whatever they dip down to. But yeah, when you're just talking about a pair of surround speakers, that is really not a concern. If you were getting into electrostatic speakers that are dipping down to 1 ohm sometimes, that's a different concern. But these are all consumer level speakers that are designed to work with a consumer level AV receiver, that is really not an issue. You might find that the trim levels are set to something that you might not entirely expect, but that's fine. That is really not a concern in these. Now, Mica does have the MB42s. They also have an MB42, what is it, MB42X or something? I'm sure they stuck an X on the end of it or whatever. The MB42s are really basic. They almost don't have a crossover. I mean, they do, but it's like one of those one element crossovers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So between
like a car
those
stereo
two,
speaker.
yeah, the more expensive, I think it's MB42X. I might be getting that wrong, but whatever the other variant is that actually is upgraded in every way, that increases the price. So if it were between the Micas and the Daytons, the MK402s, I would go with the Daytons. Those are a nicely designed speaker, very basic, but checks all the boxes. It's got the size you want. They're a well-designed speaker, a proper crossover in there between their tweeter and woofer. But we just talked about Boston Acoustics over at Accessories for Less.
That's right.
And they've got a couple of options. So first, they do have those SoundWare, the 4.5s, and like I say, $105 a pair. Now, that's going over his original $50 a pair that he was considering, but you were considering spending $150 more to get an SB-3000. I'm like, so $50 more to get surround speakers? These would be easily wall mountable, of course, integrated thing. There are also in the Boston Acoustics A-Series, the A23, which is a nice little satellite speaker. It's a little 4-inch or 3.5-inch woofer in there, so very compact size, has a little keyhole mount on the back there that you can attach a mount to or just mount via keyhole. It's got a little port on there, but it's not really much to worry about when it's just your surround speakers. Basically, we weren't sure if he was going to be wall mounting these or putting them on stands. So if you were going to put them on stands, then these little A23s would make more sense because they're just a traditional box-shaped little speaker, whereas the SoundWare 4.5s are kind of an odd little tetrahedral shape going on there.
But he's going to see that A23 and he's going to see that port and he's going to worry about chuffing.
Yeah, well,
it might
trust
chuff.
me, don't worry. Now, the A23s, they are $120 for a pair. So again, we're going over that $50 mark. So if it's got to be the $50 mark, I'd go with those Dayton MK402s that you mentioned.
Right.
If you can spend a little more, definitely have a look at those Boston Acoustics A-Series because they'd be a great choice.
Yeah, I'd rather spend the money there than upgrade the sub. Okay, well, a little bit more from him. On a different topic, Christian heard Nathan asking about an easy way for Nathan's parents to switch between a day mode and a night mode on their TV. And we suggested using a Harmony sequence, basically a macro. But if you have an AV receiver with 2 HDMI outputs, could you use both of those and then have 2 sets of Harmony activities that select different HDMI inputs on the TV? For example, Watch TV Day could use HDMI input 1 on the TV and monitor output 1 on the AV receiver, while Watch TV Night would use HDMI input 2 and monitor output 2. That way, one of the TV inputs could be used for all day mode activities, while the second HDMI input could be set for all night mode activities. You know? Yeah. He's asking because he's thinking he'd like to do something similar with one of his TV's inputs set for game mode and a second input set for cinema mode. Would that work? That sounds like a thing you could do.
Yes, that is a great idea, Christian.
It's a really good idea.
I very much like that idea, with the one caveat being, and this might affect you or it might not, the only instance where this wouldn't work for you is if you're using your TV's built-in apps. Right? Because if it's the TV's built-in apps, then you're not switching between HDMI inputs. If you want a day mode and a night mode for, say, the built-in Netflix app, if that's what you happen to be using, then you would still need to do the macro version, the sequence version, to actually change the settings within the television itself. But for all external sources, so there's a bunch of things, right? It would have to be for external sources, and you would have to have an AV receiver that's high enough in the lineup that it has 2 HDMI outputs, which of course, entry-level ones wouldn't. But yeah, if you check all those boxes, it's external sources and you have 2 HDMI outputs on your AV receiver. Yeah, this is a great idea. I love that idea.
It's actually pretty clever, especially for game mode. I like his idea of using it for when you're playing a game and you want to switch the way the picture looks. I've never had a big problem with differences between day and night, and maybe it's because I have very similar lighting all day long in the room where I have my plasma, and then my LCD it gets dimmer when the room is dimmer, and it gets brighter when the room's brighter.
But
it has
some people do have a wide range of lighting conditions, and it would make sense to have a bright mode and a dark mode. Yeah, I like that idea very much. It definitely should work. Of course, the only other thing is your television would have to be one where it remembers which picture mode depending on the HDMI input.
I think
most do.
do that now. Yeah,
most do.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a huge concern for me, but just for being complete.
Right. I know that's a super clever idea, especially for the gaming. I love it, man. So yeah, he's educating us now. Well, great idea. Moving on to Justin, not Bieber. Justin's theater is being moved into a different room. It's roughly 11 foot by 12 foot, but one corner is angled, and that's where the door is. To the right of the entry door, there's a closet, and opposite the closet, there's a window. Okay, so we're picturing our square with a corner chopped out there.
That's right.
Justin has a 5.2 setup right now that includes the large RBH Impression Series tower speakers. He's got a projection setup using the BenQ 2050A. So, how would we orient his setup in this room? He was thinking his best option would be to have the angle corner with the door as his front left corner. So the door and the closet would be on the left, the window would be on his right, and his whole setup would be shifted a bit to the right to get away from the door corner. Right.
That's right.
Otherwise, he doesn't see where he could put his surround speakers without them being way up high so that they're above the doorway. And the only issue he foresees with his proposed layout is that the front left tower speaker would be very close to the entry door when you enter the room. Do we have thoughts on that? That's a pretty good choice. You could turn around 180 degrees.
But if he does that, then his surround right speaker now is right where the entry door is, and that's what he was concerned with. So I will, first of all, I agree. I think this is a very reasonable setup that he's proposed. In the diagram that he sent, he's got his seats pushed right against the back wall, and I wouldn't do that.
Wouldn't quite do that if you can help it. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's just, the way the diagram looks. Obviously, it would be possible in the actual room to pull the seat away from the back wall a bit, and you probably would, given what screen sizes we're going to talk about in a minute. The only other thing I could think of here is actually putting the screen over the window.
If you didn't mind doing that, yeah.
That would be the only other thing, because I mean the door is going to be, if you leave 3 feet for the closet door and the entry door, so the back of your couch is at least 3 feet away from the doors.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So the door swings open and it just barely grazes the back of the couch.
Yeah, now you're 9 feet away from the window as far as where the back of the couch is.
Right.
So you're going to be, I don't know, let's say 8 feet away or so from the screen. So if hanging the screen over the window, or getting a motorized screen where you suspend it from the ceiling and then it motorizes down in front of the window, if that's an option, that's the only other way that I could see orienting it in here, because now your surround speakers are in front of where the door is going to swing open on your left and right sides, and you could place yourself centrally as far as the width of the room goes instead of having everything shifted a bit over. But that means putting the screen over top of the window. So I don't see, I mean, you can't put the screen where the closet door is. That doesn't make sense.
No, you can't do that.
Rotating the whole thing 180 degrees from what's shown in the diagram does give you that surround speaker placement issue. So yeah, it's either going to be what you show or having the screen over the window. And I'm not going to strongly advocate for one or the other. Either could work with a little bit of compromises in either case.
Yeah, that's going to boil down to whether you like the idea of a screen coming down in front of the window.
That's right.
And whether you mind the doors opening behind the couch. You would kind of have to walk around the couch as you entered the room. But I like that idea. That's not bad at all. Very clever, Rob. He hasn't bought a proper projection screen yet. He was thinking he'd go with a 92-inch silver ticket, but now he's thinking that could make the spacing of everything a bit too tight. Should he go with a smaller screen size? Well, if it's too tight, then yes, you should go with a smaller screen. You can probably go with that 92 if you did Rob's trick and turn it with the doors behind the couch. But yeah, you don't want to crowd everything too much. That neither looks good nor is practical.
I don't see it as a problem, though. I think 92 is just perfect. In fact, I would want to sit 8 feet away from a 92-inch screen, give myself a nice 45-degree field of view.
All right.
So that all works. You're going to have the 3 to 3.5 feet behind your seat in either case, whether it's the doors that are behind you or whether it's just the wall that's behind you. You are right that your front left tower is going to be close to that entrance door, but if it's the way that he's shown in the diagram where it's a right-hand door swinging in, just be a little bit careful. Don't go swinging the door open and running straight ahead into your speaker, but I think you'll be
I wonder
okay.
how much space would the door hit the front of the speaker a little bit. Like, was there enough space to put? Is there enough width so that the tower isn't all the way over in front of that door? Yeah,
it's going to be squishy, but it's just enough. It's just enough.
It feels a little crowded as you walk in the room, like that tower's right there.
But I mean, given that you'd have to go with essentially a custom size or something like that to go smaller, it's like, nah, the 92 works.
Maybe that's a good argument for turning it around with the doors behind the couch.
There's that. Then you also it could be the motorized one. If it's the motorized one, it's actually if it's a motorized one in the orientation he's shown, then that's more of a concern because it's actually wider because there's a tension bar at the bottom that makes the physical screen. But if it's in front of the window, that would be a problem. But they also have thin border screens, which only buys you like 2 inches, but sometimes that makes all the difference. So regardless, I'd say stick with the 92-inch screen size.
All right. Should he keep the closet door closed for the best acoustics, or could he remove the closet door? He'd like to put all his gear in the closet. He did a bit of a trial where he put his gear in there, closed the closet door, and let it play loud music for most of the day. And when he opened the closet back up, it wasn't hot in there. So maybe it's already fairly well ventilated. What do we think? Could he safely play a whole movie with the closet door closed? Sounds like he's worried about heat. I have a similar concern in my hallway in this house where I want to make it almost like a proper server closet, put a computer in there and run the monitor cable into an adjoining room on the other side of the wall and just hide a computer. Yeah. And I'm thinking about how do I ventilate that well? But he says he played it loud music for most of the day and it wasn't hot.
But it's winter now.
Right. Yeah, I was about to say.
Which means your attic space right now is cold. And in the summer, your attic space is going to be hot. And if it is ventilated, sometimes that heat comes down from the attic into the ventilated closet space. Because I don't think this is an actively ventilated closet with an active fan. Now, he was like, could he put a fan in there? And once you start, what you need is cool air needs to get into the closet somehow, and hot air needs to get exhausted up into your attic.
What I was considering actually was, in my situation, was a fan that blew air from the top of the closet back into the hallway and not up into the attic, because then I've got a hole between, the closet and the attic. I didn't love that idea. And because he's going to come down. I'm in Alabama.
Yeah, that needs to be an active thing. If you were going to do it that way, you'd have to have an actual, powered fan.
Yes, a powered fan with a temperature sensor that turned it on when it got above a certain temperature in the closet. And I think I might figure out a way to do that because I really think that would be cool.
But you got to have both, right? You got to have the cool air coming in somehow, which could just be the gap under the door.
The gap under the door would do the trick.
The gap under the door can be sufficient.
Half an inch. Yeah.
You have to have some way of exhausting the hot air. So I wouldn't entirely go by this test right now during the winter and being like, it was cool right now. It's like, yeah, but it's definitely cooler in your attic right now than it is in that closet. So if there is any sort of venting, that's the way it's going right now. But yeah, if you put an active fan in there, that could be okay. Now, the real question is closing the closet door going to make such a difference to the acoustics in this room that that's what you want to do? Or you could just take the door off its hinges and now you have an open space. Now, if you did that, I would certainly want to put insulation inside of that closet to get rid of acoustic echoes going on there. You don't want it to just be an echo chamber. Gosh, really opening that closet door, it does change the wave pattern in there.
It does. Yeah, it does.
In a slightly difficult to predict way. But will having it closed make such a benefit that I would go for it? I don't feel strongly either way. I really don't. And either way, you're going to be making some modifications to that closet, because I would make sure that if you're going to have the door closed, that you have active exhaust to get that hot air out.
I think I'd go for some active exhaust and put it in the closet. I think this is
I'm very okay with that,
because it's going to look nice.
It's going to look nice,
and you can better control the sound if it's closed. Yeah, a little fan that I looked online once about this, and you can buy somewhere around a 5 or 6 inch fan.
That's right.
If you don't mind cutting a hole in the drywall above the closet door and vent it back in the room, or into an adjoining room, some other room.
There's that too. Yeah, you just got to get the hot air out.
Or the hallway, if there's a hallway on the other side of, you know what I'm saying? Blow it into another room, even if it's somebody else's, bedroom or something. Why is it so hot in here? Because I'm watching a movie, and tough luck to you. I've got to
one of those two things: either take the door off the hinges and line it with insulation in there to get rid of the echoes, or put in a fan.
Right. All right, moving on. Biv on Facebook, who we all know is 1/3 of Belle Biv DeVoe. That's very cool. Biv on Facebook has one very simple question. Braided speaker cables. What's all the hoopla?
Yep. You'll see
What is the deal with braided speaker cables?
Braided speaker cables. Yep. So, it's not nothing. There is a difference that happens when you have a braided speaker cable like this, which is that the inductance of that cable goes down but the capacitance of that cable goes up.
So it's less likely to get interference? What?
A little bit. And that's exactly where Kimber got their start, is they were running speaker wires right beside fluorescent lights, which was enough. Speaker wires are largely immune to normal radio frequency or electromagnetic interference because it's a pretty high-powered signal going through a speaker wire. It's an amplified signal. It's not the little line-level signal where you definitely want to shield a line-level signal, which is what we do with a coaxial cable. With speaker wire, that's it's an amplified signal. It's quite strong. It's nearly immune to interference. But if you have something crazy like a fluorescent light with a speaker wire draped right on top of it, you will pick up interference. And braiding the speaker wire is enough that you reduce that inductance. You don't eliminate it, but you reduce the inductance. So you're inducing the signal to flow that's coming from your buzzing fluorescent light. You can reduce that with a braided speaker wire. So I'm not going to say that there's no reason to ever do this. It's not complete hokum. There is some, actual science, some basis behind this. You will reduce the inductance. Yeah. But
when I hear about speaker cables, I immediately go into my sort of arms folded, kind of like I'm looking at one of those anti-vaccine people. I'm like, really? Right. What are you doing? Because I read a hilarious article one time years ago about someone testing different speaker cables, and one of the choices was coat hangers that they just bent straight and hooked between the speakers and the amp, and that worked too, and nobody could tell it. So, it doesn't take much to have a good speaker cable, but I guess in this case, if there's a really unusual bit of interference that you're trying to avoid, maybe there's an argument for it.
And again,
otherwise,
it's not a shield. It won't completely eliminate it, but it can reduce it. It'll lower the inductance of the cable. Now, when you raise the capacitance of the cable, the ultimate end of it, whether you raise the resistance, raise the capacitance, or raise the inductance, they all result in the same audible thing, which is that it attenuates the high frequencies. It makes really no audible difference which way you go. Some people are like, oh, the lower the inductance, the better. But I'm like, but you have simultaneously raised the capacitance, and the end result is essentially the same. So
I think it boils down to this. Unless your speakers are a kilometer away from your amplifier, if you have a normal human house and your speaker run is like 20 feet or something, none of it makes any difference.
No, you don't need this.
Really unusual situation.
Some decent 14 or 12 gauge regular speaker wire. There's no reason to spend extra on braided speaker wire most of the time, even in the instance where, of course, this is an audiophile thing, right? Will it make a difference to the sound? No. Is not going to make a difference to the sound. No. That's not the reason to do this. But if you're draping your speaker wires over fluorescent lights and you don't want to eliminate that hum, but you want to reduce it as much as you can, okay, braided speaker wire can.
I guess I always just go to Home Depot and buy a spool of what the heck ever.
Yeah.
And it's always
make your wire
fine.
a little bit longer and go around the fluorescent light.
Yeah, it'll be fine. But, hey, it's always a fun discussion to remind people that some things are kind of, just hoopla. Chris H has questions. Chris H got our advice about two of his setups previously. One was his theater, where he was having dialogue intelligibility issues with his ELAC speakers, and the other was his bedroom, where his TV is super close to the side of his bed since Chris is visually impaired. Gotcha. He was planning to spend his available budget on new speakers in his bedroom, but as it turns out, he went and jumped on the SVS Black Friday sale, and bought himself a second SB12 NSD subwoofer for his theater instead. Awesome. I always have the same reaction when I hear that, is like somebody said, I adopted another puppy. I'm like, oh, it's wonderful.
That's
Yay,
right.
Congrats. It's so awesome. He's loving having dual subs. They keep each other company, and it's really fun. So no regrets about that decision. And he was so pleased with the huge difference that adding some DIY absorption panels made to his dialogue intelligibility problem, that he has now covered those panels in black fabric and made them a permanent fixture in his theater. And it looks good. We're looking at pictures. He did a great
I showed some
job.
before and afters, but it's looking nice in there. It's sounding great in there, which of course is the entire point of all that stuff. So we've done some little advice, and now he's got another subwoofer living up in the front left corner of his room, since his other subwoofer is in his rear right corner.
Man, that's fantastic. But there's always a but, isn't there? But now a totally new issue has cropped up. He has no money. No. The receiver in his theater is an Emotiva Fusion 8100. He noticed that the entire image from his Blu-ray player was tinted pink. He swapped players and cables, but the pink tint remained. Interesting. And then the audio started dropping out, and the Fusion 8100's on-screen display started randomly popping up. He finally changed his Blu-ray player to a different HDMI input on the Emotiva receiver, and that managed to work for an entire movie, but he's thinking the HDMI board in the Emotiva is to blame. Do we agree? I'm probably going to agree. It's old enough now that it's out of warranty, but Emotiva will replace the HDMI board for $150. Would that be worth it, or should he just get a whole new receiver? Maybe use the Emotiva as a dumb amp, since it does have 7.1 analog inputs. I will tell you, HDMI boards, inputs and outputs, are sensitive little buggers. I have had inputs on friends and family's television, HDMI outputs have messed up, inputs have messed up. I still have my Yamaha receiver with the HDMI out that is screwed up from a nearby lightning strike. I haven't looked to see if I can buy a new board for that Yamaha. Maybe I could, and that might get me by for a while. I should look at that. But HDMI is a sensitive thing. I don't know why.
Yes.
Why is it so sensitive? It's so easy to pop an HDMI to confuse it into
it definitely happens a lot. Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if, yes, the HDMI board in there is starting to go on the fritz. That wouldn't be shocking to me whatsoever.
What is it about
which is unfortunate.
HDMI?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why it's so finicky, but I don't. Maybe it's because it's 19 teeny tiny little pins on a connector that's friction fit, and it's a horrible design. That could have something to do.
Maybe
with it.
That's it. Super sensitive to a surgeon.
What should he do here? Because this is an old enough unit that it doesn't support all the 4K and HDR stuff, which he doesn't have a TV that does that yet, but at some point in the future he might. So does he spend $150 now to just repair exactly what he has, or does he take that $150? He's going to have to spend more than $150 to get an entirely new AV receiver. Now, you could go with, say, $250.
That would get you into better features.
Yeah, that'd be like an X1400H from Accessories for Less, a Denon X1400H, which gets you multi-Q XT, not XT32, but it gets you XT, it gets you all the latest HDMI stuff, all the HDR support, Dolby Vision pass-through, all that kind of stuff. Even Atmos support in a 5.2.2 configuration. So, you're getting lots of feature upgrades, which on the video side, you're not using immediately until if and when you eventually upgrade your television. But, it's only $100 more and you're getting all the latest stuff. So that's a consideration for sure. Now, if you were going to try and use your Fusion 8100 just as an amplifier, now whatever new AV receiver you buy, or pre-pro, but we're going to say AV receiver, would have to have pre-outs. Which means you're looking at, in Denon's lineup, all the way up at like the X3400H, and now you're at a $500 AV receiver from Accessories for Less. It's like a $1,000 receiver brand new, but Accessories for Less has it for $500, which is a great deal, and it does get you XT32, but, that's a lot of money compared to $150. That's a big price jump. Even
in my cheapo world, that's down to the point where I'm probably going to throw another $100 at it.
My inclination, is to like get an X1400. It's, now it's just, you've replaced the thing. You've got all the latest features. You're ready for the future. If you do upgrade your television, you could even give Atmos a go if you wanted to. If you got another pair of speakers lying around, you can make a 5.2.2. Yeah. I mean, 150. And not only that, it's $150. You also have to ship it into them for them to replace it. So that's not free.
Oh, yeah. Hang on. He's not receiving the board to put in himself. Okay, at that point, I'm definitely going to say it's time to upgrade. Yeah, because by the time you ship that, you're at the point where you can just buy.
I mean, I hate telling somebody who's on a fixed budget to go spend $250, but when the alternative is spending $150 plus shipping costs, it's like, And
I also hate this because I like being able to fix things. It breaks my heart when I have something that's a perfectly good thing. Yeah. And you could fix it.
You're not going to DIY fix an HDMI board. Yeah.
No. So that, I hate, but okay, I'm time for something new. I think this is what's going on there. All right, moving on. And by the way, when he gets that new amp, he has this amazing setup he's built, and it's beautiful, and it's just the right thing to do. Dan D. Dan is close to finishing his dedicated basement home theater. He's been listening to AVRant for the past couple of years, so he applied a lot of the advice we gave to other listeners. All right. The room is 19 feet by 12 by 7.5. He used double drywall on resilient channels. How about that? And enclosed the room with a door. Excellento.
Yay.
He wanted,
Yes.
Yeah. Because there's always those like wide open stairways down into basements. He wanted crazy bass, but ported boxes wouldn't physically fit. I gotcha. Which he discovered thanks to building cardboard boxes like we recommended. Yes, that's wonderful. Every time now that, I'm looking at a new TV, I'm always cutting out big pieces of paper. If I'm looking at speakers, I'm going to make the cardboard box. So he went with a pair of SVS SB-16 Ultras. Although he built the box and said this works.
I mean, with this room size, that is some major overkill. But hey, man, you will never have to question whether you're getting all the bass or not.
But, who is Rob to talk when it comes to overkill?
This is true. I have
rooms.
PC-13 Ultras in an even smaller room. So.
In an even smaller room. Although he had to put them both up front since they wouldn't fit anywhere else.
Yep.
Unless you could just put cushions on them and sit on them. There's always that option. He got a JVC X790 projector, Illune Vision screen. Is that how you say that? Illune Vision?
That's
Illune Vision screen. He's in Canada. Harmony Elite remote. And an NVIDIA Shield. All right, so he's gaming in this situation. He already had Paradigm Monitor V5 series speakers that he's still very happy with. And he went with an Anthem MRX 1120 receiver to drive a 7.2.4 configuration. He got to hear a demo of some Dynamic Audio Labs in-ceiling speakers, which we've never talked about, but they sounded good, so he went with those. He's got 2 rows of seats, 3 theater recliners up front as his primary row, and then 4 seats, a love seat in the middle flanked by 2 recliners on a riser close to his back wall. There's about an 8-inch gap. Man, it looks awesome.
It looks sweet.
It sounds and just looks fan-freaking-tastic. The sidewalls bump in for a couple of bulkheads just behind his front row of seats. So his questions are about surround and surround back speakers. I can imagine. Okay. And we've got pictures and pictures and pictures. Okay.
Yes, we have.
He's got a pair of Monitor 7 towers, a pair of ADP 390 adaptive dipole surrounds, and a pair of mini monitors.
Those are all Paradigm speakers.
All these are Paradigms, yes. He could also get Atom monitors for an even smaller size. He's trying to figure out the best way to deploy some combination of those as his surrounds and surround backs. He wrote to Paradigm, and they recommended using the ADP 390s on the sides and the mini monitors on the back wall, but he's concerned about the bulkheads that jut in on the sidewalls and the mini monitors being a bit large once wall mounts are added. So he's afraid they're sticking out into the room.
That's right, or off the back wall, right? Because if you put in the mini monitor speakers on the back wall, then he's like, he's going to have to be on wall mounts of some kind. He's only got 8 inches behind the back of the back row to those speakers, and they're going to be sticking out.
Yeah. So where are we at? He also isn't sure how far apart the surround back speakers should be on the back wall. What's our advice? It's coming down to math and directionality. Where can you fit these things and aim it at everybody?
Interestingly, Dolby has once again updated their white paper for speaker placement recommendation for Atmos setups. And now they actually have put in a thing where they say, take the width of your room, multiply that by anywhere in the range between 0.5 and 0.75.
Okay.
And that is what they're now recommending as your distance apart for your Atmos speakers and your surround back speakers.
Okay.
I mean, that's in addition to all the angles that they already gave. They didn't.
So in his case,
supersede.
6 or 7 feet apart?
6 to 9 feet apart.
6 to 9.
In his case, because it's a 12-foot wide room, so multiply by 0.5, multiply by 0.75, and between 6 and 9 feet apart. That's what they recommend. In other words, between 1.5 and 3 feet from the side walls. And I think that's a pretty good recommendation in both instances. I think both for the Atmos speakers overhead and for the surrounds back speakers at the back. That makes sense. Now, he's pre-wired for some surround backs, it looks like. There's some wires sticking out back there. I think that's totally fine where they are. I mean, they're supposed to be behind you. You don't want them so far out to the sides that the sound is going to be shooting into those bulkheads that are sticking out on the sidewalls. I think where you've wired is fine. Make sure they're at least 6 feet apart, which I don't think is a problem.
That looks to be about 6 feet. Just looking at his picture,
just eyeballing it.
Yeah.
So make sure they're 6 feet apart. If they're a little bit wider, that's also fine. But yeah, I think that's a fine recommendation.
The key to me is always, if my ears were eyes, can they see the drivers?
Right. Yeah,
That's sort of
clear line of sight from the tweeters to the ears. Now, which speakers go where? And okay, so I am going to go off the beaten path on here for purely logistical reasons.
He's going rogue.
Yep. Because normally I wouldn't have you putting those ADP 390s, so when Paradigm calls it an adaptive dipole, what it is the tweeters are on the sides of those speakers and they're in a dipole configuration. So they're firing out of phase with one another, reverse polarity. But there are also small woofers on both sides and those are firing in phase.
Okay.
So it's part bipole, part dipole, and they call it an adaptive dipole. Now, normally those would go on your sidewalls and act as your surround speakers in a traditional setup where you used to use dipole speakers, right, on the sides. But I don't think that's a good choice in here, right? You can't put them on those bulkheads. There's no room. You can't put it in front of the bulkhead because then it's blocking the back. You can't put it behind the bulkhead because then it's blocking the front. And I'm not a huge fan of putting Atoms or mini monitors on that back wall because, like you say, they will be sticking out. So I'm going to say take the ADP 390s that you have and use them as your surround backs.
Now, I like that too in this case.
Right.
I do.
I mean, is that the traditional advice where we're normally saying put monopoles in the back wall? No, but they're completely wall mountable. They have the shallow depth. They're not going to protrude into the back of your back row seats. They're totally fine as surround backs. Are they dipole speakers on your back wall? Is that ideal? Okay, no. But logistically, it makes so much more sense to put them there. So I think that's where those go.
If your ear was an eye, you can look right directly at some driver pointing at you.
Now, he also has mini monitors, which are bookshelf speakers, and he has a spare pair of towers, the smaller Monitor 7s. I'm thinking you put the Monitor 7s on the risers next to your back row of seats, and you put the mini monitors on the wall in front of the bulkhead beside your front row of seats, and you have two pairs of surround speakers, one pair for each row.
I love it. That's what theaters do. They have multiple surrounds so that everybody gets it off to the side. So man, that's great.
With those towers on the riser, they're going to be around the same height as the wall-mounted mini monitors.
Yes.
So they're all around the same height. Now both rows of seats get dedicated surround speakers for each row. You're using all the speakers you have on hand, and you're just going to wire them in series. It's not that difficult a thing.
Right.
So that's my recommendation. It's off the beaten path, but that's what I do.
No, man, I love it. That you made everything fit, and you're going to get the effects you're supposed to get.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hurt
using
anything
everything you already got.
Just, use everything you've got. Do what Rob said. Try it. I bet that sounds great. I bet it does. I'd love to hear how that goes. So there you go.
I did want to mention, he's got a 16:9 screen, but then he's got an image where he's showing a 2.35:1 movie. With that JVC, do those black bars not look black to you even without masking? Those look like some black bars to me.
Huh. Yes, I would say that's very black.
Yeah, this is why I'm not super worried about using a 16:9 screen to watch 2.35:1 movies when you got a JVC projector, because them black bars is black.
Just control the light and get a good projector, and you don't need all the fancy masking and so forth. All right, here we go. Moving on to Bobby M. Bobby got a Denon X1400H receiver. For the most part, it's fine, but when he uses his cable box, at first, the audio cuts out, and sometimes the video too. If he switches the Denon to a different HDMI input and then back to the cable box, it works fine. But it's annoying that he has to do this every time just to watch TV. Any ideas for a fix? HDMI.
I know, right?
HDMI.
And this one, I don't know.
I don't think there's a way around it. It's a
don't
handshaking sort of issue, isn't it?
A really great solution for this. Do you turn your cable box on and off? Because you really don't need to.
Leave it on. It doesn't save energy to turn it off. It's not really off.
It doesn't. That's the thing.
It pretty much just turns the display off on the front and turns the output off.
Yeah, if you've got a power conditioner or a kilowatt or anything like that where you can plug in and monitor how much power is being drawn by your devices, you'll notice that your cable box is drawing the exact same amount of power whether you put it in standby or not. They all do. Yeah, that's just the way they are. So if you were thinking you were saving any power by putting it in standby, you're not, in which case you can leave it on all the time. If you got a Harmony remote, you just tell it, this device never turns off, and that takes care of it in all of your activities. So that could be one thing. I don't know if that'll help you whatsoever.
I bet it will. I bet that's a good guess.
It could be that. If it's a handshaking issue, what can you do? You have to do what you're doing. You could build that in to your activity. If you're using a Harmony remote, you could just tell it, you know what, when I say watch TV, you switch to a different HDMI input and then you switch back.
You could do that.
To you, it's still one button press. It kind of gets rid of the annoyance of you manually having to switch HDMI inputs on your AV receiver. That's about the best I got on that one. I'm sorry. I wish I had something better to say on that, but
I doubt it's the cable, but you could change out the cable and maybe a different cable box.
I mean, it works fine when he flicks back and forth, so I don't think it's the physical cable.
Or maybe it's the cable box.
Make sure HDMI CEC is turned off and everything.
There's that. Yeah.
But other than that, I don't. I wish I had something better to say, but it's one of those things.
I'm going to vote for leaving the box on all the time. Just try that and let us know.
Sure, try it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's an easy thing to try. All of his speakers are identical Klipsch R14M 4-inch bookshelf speakers. In his 12-foot by 12-foot room, would it be worth upgrading to the brand new Klipsch reference Premier speakers for his front three? He'd still want the small size, so it would be the RP400M and 400C 4-inch models. So, Rob, is there enough of a difference between those older and newer speakers to justify doing that? I doubt it.
I mean, my inclination is no.
Yeah, that's
my inclination is
unlikely.
If you were going to spend what it costs to get the reference Premier speakers, I mean, I don't think it's different enough. It's like if you were going to spend that money, I want to spend it on something significantly different and not even to be an upgrade, just to be different. Right. It's like, I've gotten used to these speakers. I want to try something different. That I can justify. Mm-hmm. I don't think this is where you spend your money. It's not that I mean, I like the reference Premier speakers, and it's not that I don't think there's zero difference between the reference series and the reference Premier series, but I just don't think it's worth it. I wouldn't recommend spending your money that way.
Probably not going to wow you enough to justify the dollars.
Right.
All along, he was going to use dual SVS PB-1000 subs, but a smaller footprint would be nice. The thought crossed his mind to get a single SB-3000 instead.
In a 12 by 12 room.
What would be the pros and cons? Well, the cons are you're going to crush your skull.
I mean, you wouldn't be able to afford two of them for the $1,000 price. You're now $2,000 to get two SB-3000s.
You've got the uniformity issue of bass in the room. Right. So if it's just you and everybody else can pound sand, then okay. But now
I do see what he's saying about PB-1000s, even though it's a 10-inch driver in there. It's a big old box. I don't blame anybody for being like, that's a big old box. Now, a 12 by 12 room, I will tell you that SB-1000s, which are the same price, would be so fine in this room. You're going to have plenty of room gain. So yes, their minus 3 decibel point on the SB-1000s is 23 hertz, not 20 hertz, but you're going to get room gain. We know he has a door on this 12 by 12 room. Yeah. So if you need the same price but a smaller size, SB-1000s I can totally get behind. If you're like, I just gotta have that minus 3 dB point, say 20 and not 23, you could spend more for SB-2000s. There's no reason to get SB-3000s in this room. Zero reason to do it, Bobby. I
would much rather have two sealed smaller subwoofers than a single SB-3000.
The SB-3000, that's crazy town. Don't do that. So SB-2000s I could maybe see, but the price goes up quite a bit. It's an extra $400. So if you got to stay with the same $1,000 price point and you need the smaller size, SB-2000s will be totally fine. I promise you, Bobby.
But I know everybody's sensation is, what if I'm missing something?
I know, of course.
What if
and this is a lot of money. $1,000 is a lot of money to be spending on a couple of subwoofers. I don't blame anybody for questioning it and wanting all of it. But I promise you, SB-1000s would be fine in here, apparently.
There you go. His collection of Ultra HD Blu-rays is starting to get fairly large. That's making him interested in backing them up so he can play them without having to actually use the physical discs. But he doesn't have an up-to-date computer. So what all would he need in order to back up, store, and play Ultra HD Blu-ray backups? Well, you're going to need a Blu-ray drive.
Yes, you will need a UHD friendly is the term that they give them. I'll just point you straight to the answer, because instead of explaining it in full, it's easier to just point you to the answer, which is to go to the MakeMKV.com forum.
There you go.
So MakeMKV.com, go over to their forum. They have an entire Ultra HD Drive section in the forum.
There you go. Okay.
And what you'll find in there is, first of all, there's a couple of people who are just selling drives that are already ready to back up Ultra HD Blu-rays. That's the easiest thing, because if you go to a store right now, the ones you're going to buy in a retail box, they've updated all the firmwares so that it doesn't work anymore.
I see.
You can't back up Ultra HD Blu-rays. They don't work anymore. You can't buy it in a store in a retail box. They do have instructions on that very same forum for how to roll back the firmware
on a drive that you buy
to a version that works. And there are some specific drives. So I'm going to say, go to that forum, look at the models that are listed there. I'm going to recommend you just buy from one of the two guys on that forum who's selling them ready to go, because they're not overcharging. They're very reasonable with what they're charging. And honestly, that's the way to go. So you need one of those drives. Now, you need a computer.
Obviously.
You do need a PC to do
and
this.
This isn't a notebook computer situation either.
Well, it could be.
I guess you could use it as an external drive.
Because just the backing up part of it, you don't need anything super powerful. It might take longer on an old, slow computer.
Right.
But you need the drive. Now, if it needs to be connected externally, this is one of the other things. The UHD-friendly drives that work aren't external drives. They're internal drives. But you can put them into a case.
You could.
To turn them into an external drive. So if you have an old laptop or something, and there's no way to install an internal UHD drive into that, you can get it as an external format. Again, the same guys who sell it, they'll sell it to you with an external chassis. So you can do all of that from the Make MKV forum, get the drive that you need, connect it to any old computer, even externally if you need to, with an external cage around it. You can do all that. Then you will use Make MKV, and that's the software you need. So that will get you the backup into a MKV file.
I would not use a computer more than a few years old for this. I wouldn't, because it's going to take. You could. It's just going to take forever and make the whole process not any fun.
It might take 4 hours to back up one disk, but
that's called not any fun. I'm telling you, like a little notebook with an external drive, I've just seen too many times where things just don't quite go right.
Yeah,
and an older computer is going to be slow with 4K anything, even if it's not. It's just processing all night long sometimes. So I don't know. I would have a desktop, but.
The next question is, what are you going to use to play it back? Because if your plan is to use the same computer to play back the backups, and you're not going to have some other playback device, well, like he's saying, he doesn't have an up-to-date computer. So at this point, you're probably getting yourself a computer. Now, you got a couple of choices. You're going to want one that is at least a 7th generation Intel processor. They're on the 8th generation right now, so that shouldn't be a problem.
This isn't just a matter of speed, is it? This is
a matter of having the correct HDMI output.
Right.
Because the only way you're going to play back 4K content off of a PC is with built-in internal Intel graphics or certain NVIDIA graphics cards, but that's not what you need here. You're not building a gaming PC.
No.
So you need the integrated Intel graphics, and it has to be from the 7th or 8th generation of Intel processors, but that really shouldn't be a problem. I mean, any little computer that you buy today will be a 7th or an 8th generation, as long as you get in an Intel. So that's not a huge issue, but if you're using the PC to play it back, do you want something that's going to have fan noise? Is it going to be in the same room as all this? You want a silent playback device.
Yeah.
So if you want a silent playback device, I would highly recommend getting an NVIDIA Shield. Because I'm going to recommend that you just use Plex to do all this. The NVIDIA Shield can be both your Plex server and your Plex playback device. Now the question is simply, where are the backups stored? Right? So they could be stored on this computer that you use. If it's got a large enough hard drive, you connect it to your network, you connect the NVIDIA Shield to the network, and it all plays over that. You could just buy yourself a big old honkin' USB hard drive. It doesn't have to be fast.
No,
because even though you're thinking, oh, it's 4K, it's like, no, it's 100 megabits per second at the most. Any hard drive can deliver that.
Absolutely.
You can plug that in with USB directly to your NVIDIA Shield. You get yourself a nice big 10 or 12 terabyte drive. It's going to store plenty for a while. And that could be your setup. You back it up even on an old computer. You move it over to that USB hard drive. You plug that straight into your NVIDIA Shield, and away you go. That's your playback system.
I don't see a way to make this super cheap if you don't have really anything. Like if you're starting with all you have is like some ancient computer that probably isn't going to do the trick. This isn't something you're just going to pull off quite so easily. Yeah. So it's a several $100 situation.
It is, but if you want a silent PC to also be your playback device, that's not going to be super cheap. In fact, it's usually going to be cheaper to get, let's say he even still needs to buy a new tower. right? You get yourself a 7th generation Core i3 basic little tower. You get a refurbished one from Best Buy or something, or a refurbished one from Dell. That's all you need. You spend like $300 or $400 on that. You get the Ultra HD Blu-ray drive, and then you get an NVIDIA Shield. In total, that's going to be still less expensive than getting a nice silent PC that can play it back.
Well, if you have a friend that can build one,
yeah, maybe.
I could build one for not much and make it pretty darn silent.
Pretty quiet.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, this is just not easy. And there's
it's not super easy, but it's not super hard. I love the NVIDIA Shield as the solution for both the playback and acting as your Plex server.
Right.
So, yeah, those are all the things you need. You need a computer. You need the UHD drive. Your computer could be your playback device. Make sure it's an Intel 7th or 8th generation if that's what you're going to do. And then you need somewhere to store it, which is probably just a USB hard drive.
Right. Much like my discussion about digitizing old analog videos, this has to sound fun to you.
Yeah.
Because it's going to take a little bit of trying and thinking and buying stuff. So moving on now to Infinite Gary. Infinite Gary asks this question every time I'm pinch hitting.
Yep.
I swear his name's on there every time I'm here. Oh, excuse me. I'm all choked up about Infinite Gary. Gary has a Cablevision DVR in his bedroom. Once in a while, he'll record something on that DVR that he'd like to watch down in his home theater. Typically, he'll just unplug it and physically take it down to the theater. But could a wireless HDMI solution of some kind allow him to leave the DVR in the bedroom and send the signal about 75 feet down to his theater? He's used a 75-foot fiber optic HDMI cable, and on a side note, that taught him that active and fiber optic HDMI cables are directional.
Yes, they are.
But how would he control the DVR if it's still in the bedroom upstairs? So that might be two different setups. So what you got there, Rob, I see you've provided a link to an Amazon product.
Yeah, I mean, the way I would do this, so first of all, wireless HDMI is definitely not going to work for this. Wireless HDMI, it's blasting out at such a high frequency up in the gigahertz, multi-gigahertz range that you basically need line of sight. It really will not go through floors and walls and stuff like that. It's just wireless HDMI is not the solution here. So you got the fiber optic 75-foot HDMI cable. I guess you could... I mean, there should be some way to set up like a Harmony remote, which is RF.
Right.
75 feet, that's going to be a challenge getting it all the way over there to the hub. You could do repeaters. You could do IR repeaters. Yeah. But honestly, the way I would do a setup like this, where you're well away, you got one device way up somewhere, 75, 100 feet away, is I would use HDBaseT. We've talked about Emotiva has a $400 HDBaseT solution that actually does all the things, 4K, HDR, and even HDMI ARC, the audio return channel, which is a little bit rare in HDBaseT. That's $400. But there's a unit you can buy on Amazon that's $250. It does not do ARC, but I don't think that's really a problem because he's sending it from his cable box to his display.
Yeah, that's not what he's wanting. Yeah.
Not from his display back to the cable box.
Right.
So it doesn't do ARC, but it's $250. HDMI HDBaseT Extender. We'll have the link for it at avrant.com for the specific one.
I like this.
What that also does is, so you're running Ethernet, right? You're going to have one of these HDBaseT devices up next to your cable box. Then it's going to be an Ethernet cable connecting that to another little HDBaseT device that's down in your theater.
There you go.
The only thing going between those two things is an Ethernet cable. You only have to plug in one of those HDBaseT devices to the wall because it actually sends power over Ethernet to power the other little device at the other end. And it will also send the IR commands via that same Ethernet cable.
How about that? Now
and
that sounds perfect.
IR in and IR out on both ends of the little HDBaseT devices. So it checks all the boxes. It is $250, but Ethernet cable is super cheap. Right. And that's the way I would do it. It takes care of everything that you need to do in this situation.
Yeah, that's HDMI 2.0B.
It's all the things.
Yeah,
everything
it is all
except
the things. ARC. There you go. Perfect thing to do. And finally, one more from him. Do Tom or me, Lee, today, and or Rob, have any examples that spring to mind where we bought an audio product and had one opinion of it at first, but then that opinion changed as we spent more time with it? Yes.
Okay. What's yours?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the receiver in my living room right now, when I first got that, I thought for sure I'd hear no sound difference between the previous receiver. So I had a receiver from about the year 2000. And then I got one in 2014. And when I first plugged it in, it sounded like too much was coming through the center channel it sounded like they took my bass away. It just sounded wrong. And then what I realized over time, I mean, at first what I did is I start really pumping up the bass and I turned down the center channel. I was like, what is this stupid thing? Why is it? And then I realized after a while that I was actually hearing more clarity from the center.
Okay.
And I literally noticed that I could understand dialogue better. And my speakers didn't change. That's what blew my mind. I'm like, how is this receiver doing that? And I'm not talking about crazy obvious effects. I'm just talking about like I was a little unhappy and confused. It sounded different. But after a while, I noticed myself changing the settings back to what the receiver recommended in the first place. And so I started creeping that center channel back up again and realizing, oh, that's what I was supposed to be hearing. And
you came to appreciate it.
I came to appreciate it. And I found that strange because, I don't know, I just think of like amps should be amps. But maybe it's the processing that was getting me.
The amplifier probably is. But yeah, there's additional processing going on.
There is. And it turned out to be better, but I was a little bit disappointed and confused at first. So that absolutely happens. And I've had speakers and headphones kind of be the same way. It's just different. Your ears hear something as different, and you can't quite decide at first, is this worse? Is this better? Well, I remember way back many years ago getting the big tower Yamaha speakers that I have and thinking that it was just weird in the treble sounded harsh. And again, I was hearing clarity. I was hearing what I was supposed to be hearing, whereas before I had an old rack stereo system from the 80s, and it was nice and boomy and I was used to it, and just so I was hearing. So yes, those are two examples that spring to mind for me, definitely.
Yeah, well, the one that immediately springs to mind for me was the first proper subwoofer that I got, because I started with a RCA brand home theater in a box, and it had a thing that it called a subwoofer, but that always sounded bad.
Definitely an improper subwoofer. And now you have a proper.
The first thing where I bought all the components separately were Polk speakers, and I got a Polk 10-inch sub, and I thought that thing was the bee's knees when I first got it.
Yeah.
But over time, I was like, I mean, it's making a whole lot more noise than the old little RCA home theater box subwoofer ever did. But it's like, it's not really very tight. It's not really very accurate. And so mine was kind of the reverse. Over time, I came to be like, I need something better. And that's when that's might have been what really prompted me to like get on the forums, learn about internet direct brands. I ended up with an HSU subwoofer. And that was like, oh yeah, I was right. That Polk wasn't doing everything.
You're right. Was it chuffing, Rob? It might have been chuffing.
Well, you could actually visibly see the curtains being blown by the air coming out of the port on the little Polk. So
I've seen that, yeah.
Yeah, so that mine was the reverse. Over time, I became less enamored because compared to the home theater in a box sub, it was an upgrade. I'm not saying it wasn't that, but it took a little while. But I was like, yeah, this isn't giving me everything, and it led down to where I am today.
Right. So, it's not that the equipment changed, your ears change. And that's where, like, when people say you got to break in these speakers till they sound good, you're breaking in your brain.
You're breaking in your brain. That's what you're breaking in.
It's not changing significant. I hear that all the time and I cringe every time I hear it. No, you're just getting used to it. So there's our stories of things. So those are all real things. John on Twitter. It appears as though most receivers have their watts per channel specified as 2 channels driven these days. They also have some sort of peak power specification, like maybe the watts per channel for 1 channel driven at 1% distortion. Is there some way to take those specs and calculate what the all channels driven watts per channel would be? No. Am I correct there? You cannot do a conversion. You don't know for sure.
Not precisely, but I can give you something that'll get you kind of in the ballpark.
All right.
Hopefully that's good enough. Right.
I'll take it.
Now, Axiom actually years ago was like, this is the formula they use, and it's usually about right. Usually if you actually do a full measurement, like Audioholics is great because they do full all channels driven measurements of including AV receivers. So that's one way to double check. But the formula that Axiom gave gets you in the ballpark, which is you take that specification that they give. So let's say they're saying it's 100 watts per channel, 2 channels driven.
Okay.
Right. Full bandwidth, 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz into an 8 ohm load at a fairly low distortion, 0.05 distortion or something like that, 0.1% distortion. Some figure like that. You'll see that very commonly on AV receivers, and it will say 2 channels driven. So you take that amount. So let's say it's 100 watts per channel. So let's multiply that by 2. So right now we're at 200 watts.
Okay.
That's what we've got. Now, take however many channels are remaining. So if it's a 7-channel receiver, like a lot of them are, you've got 5 more channels, right? You've taken the 2 channels, 100 watts each, so that's 200 watts. You take the 5 remaining channels, and you say that each of them is using 1/4 of the rated power. So 25 watts into each of those, right? So that's another 125 watts. So you add that all together. So in this case, we're saying it's rated at 100 watts per channel. It's got 7 amplifiers, and we're saying we've got about 325 watts total. Divide that by 7, and that's approximately the all channels driven.
Okay.
It gets you in the ballpark.
All right. No, that's fair. Okay.
Yeah. If it gives you one of those peak 1-channel driven ones, usually if you just take that number, multiply it by 2, and then divide by the number of channels, again, you get in the ballpark.
All right.
Yeah.
There's some math. Maybe we should put those notes on the website.
Oh, sure. I can include that.
Put the equation there. And so, moving on to Brandon N. And by the way, I'm going to head out here in a little bit. Can we do maybe Brandon and then one more after that?
Sure. I might carry on a little bit because we do have a backlog, but yeah, I'm going to try to keep this not super long. So yes, you leave when you need to leave.
Well, I got family showing up. So.
Of course. I appreciate you being here whatsoever.
It was unplanned, so, people from out of town. So, Brandon N. First, some updates. Brandon had the issue where his projector and flat panel wouldn't work, even though one of them would always be in standby if the other display was on, when he had them both connected to his Marantz receiver. We suggested using the Zone 2 HDMI output on the receiver, but he was already using that for an actual second zone.
You're right. Yes.
Hey, someone actually set up a second zone. See, I thought I wanted a second zone and then never touched it. We had also mentioned potentially using a Harmony sequence to go through the Marantz's menus to select only HDMI output 1 or HDMI output 2 as necessary, instead of leaving the HDMI output on both. As it turns out, the Harmony database has unique commands for selecting HDMI output 1 or HDMI output 2. So it was as simple as adding that command to each of his activities. Works flawlessly. Excellent, though.
So that's a fantastic thing to know. That's great. It's not going to necessarily work for every single AV receiver out there. Yeah. But for Marantz and Denon, that's great. They have discrete commands to choose which HDMI output is being used.
That's
wonderful.
Lucky. Yeah, that's actually very lucky, very fortuitous.
Yes.
Second update. He heard Rob's take on picking a flat panel display, saying to either save money and get a Vizio P-Series or go high end for either an OLED or a flagship LCD, and that anything in between isn't really worth it. That's kind of what he said. Yep. So he got a Vizio P Quantum, but he wasn't entirely happy with it. So he downgraded, quote unquote, downgraded to a Sony X900F, which doesn't have color banding, or at least much less, looks clearer with fast motion, and has better upscaling. So he's happier with the Sony, even though it's one of those in-the-middle models. Now his question. What battery...
that's totally fair, Brandon. That
Absolutely.
Is totally fair. In a little bit of defense of myself, I will say I mentioned in passing that the Sony does have especially the motion processing that a lot of people do like. So if that's the thing, then that's going to be one of those features that puts that particular model over the top for you. But it's not as though I dislike any of the models that were in the middle. No. It was mostly that, when someone's like, should I spend $600 more than the Vizio P-Series? It's difficult for me to justify.
Right. Unless you have the specific reason.
That's right. And that's Some people will find that justification, and that is completely fine.
That's why I said Brandon wasn't exactly characterizing your comments just right. So yeah,
I wrote this up. It's not like those are my words.
You wrote what he wrote.
Brandon's sentiments. Okay. So that's right.
All right, but no, fair enough. If there's a specific reason you like something better, you like it better, and that's great.
Of course.
Those TVs exist for a reason with those features, for a reason.
And, the Sonys are really nice, so I got no beef with that whatsoever. And I'm glad that you found a TV that you're very happy with. That is the main thing.
Right. I'm a Sony fan. Now his questions. What battery backup should he get for his projector? His projector is far away from his equipment, so he was thinking something physically small and not too expensive would be nice. He came across CyberPower's mini tower UPS units for 100 to 150 or so. They'd only run on battery for 2 to 5 minutes, but that should be just enough to safely power down the projector in the event of a blackout, right? That sounds logical to me.
Uh-huh.
Is that enough?
Don't get those.
Don't get
those.
Just don't get them.
Just look at the Amazon reviews. Don't get those. I'll leave it at that. Don't get those.
What do they do wrong?
Right away, I'll say there's an alternative in a very similar price point. from APC.
Yes, APC is a good brand.
Whom we do trust. And that would be, so it's tough because APC is very straightforward with what they say. They don't fudge things. And so they will say, if you plug in devices to our battery backup units that are not the devices that we recommend plugging into this particular model, we aren't going to cover you.
I see.
You know, something goes bad, we aren't going to cover you, which, fair enough. They state it very plainly. Here are the devices that we recommend plugging into it. If it's not on that list, we're not going to cover you. Kind of got to say fair. But that being said, their Back-UPS units are very reliable. The battery life is longer than these CyberPowers. The price isn't any higher. And if you go with the BE850 in the Back-UPS series, so it's tough because I can't tell you that it's completely safe because this is a projector you're plugging into it. And if something does go wrong, APC is entirely within their rights to say that we're not covering that because they don't say to plug AV gear into their Back-UPS units. They say these are for computers and computer peripherals. So it's very tough for me to say I can 100% go you're safe with this. But at the same time, if that's all you need, is you need some battery power, it's going to work. It's going to be
Isn't
okay.
a projector arguably computer equipment?
Yeah, it's kind of tough.
I'm sorry, but I have a law degree, so...
Yes, exactly.
I think you can make that argument.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's the one I'm going to point you to if this is what you want, but there's a little bit more to it.
All right. Brandon knows we've recommended the APC J25, but that's a bit big and pricey if his projector is the only thing plugged into it. The only other gear that's somewhat physically close to the projector is a subwoofer, but we've said not to plug subwoofers into a power conditioner, right? But would a surge protector for the sub still be a good idea? Maybe use one of the surge-only outlets on the battery backup unit? What should he buy and what should he plug into it? Is his specific question. And I don't think a surge protector ever hurts anything. The surge side
if it's one of the ones that limits the amount of amperage that can get through it.
Oh, well, okay. A properly sized surge protector shouldn't hurt anything. Gotcha.
Yeah, so I'm fine with plugging a sub into a surge protector that allows the full 15 amps through because sometimes you need that in very rare instances. If it were the J25, it has a couple of outputs on it that say surge only high amperage or high current. I think it says high current.
Perfect.
Those would be fine for a subwoofer, but he doesn't really want the J25.
No.
So I wouldn't really highly recommend plugging in a big subwoofer to one of the Back-UPS units. Those on their surge-only outlets, because they do have both battery and surge-only outlets, those do choke it down to 12 amps. Probably not going to be a problem, but I wouldn't highly recommend it. I would just plug your sub straight into the wall.
Okay.
Subwoofers, the manuals will all tell you to do that. So I don't really see... So I'm in favor of getting the J25. I'm in favor of using it for more than your projector, and I'm in favor of putting it next to your equipment and then installing a male inlet near your equipment so that you can plug a regular small extension cord from the J25 into the male inlet. You then run Romex from the male inlet to the regular electrical outlet that you have positioned near your projector.
Oh, okay.
And so you've basically created a in-code extension cable that gets the projector's connector all the way over to your equipment panel so that everything can plug into your J25, including things like your cable box so that when the power goes out, you can still continue your recordings.
That would be nice.
Which I love. Or your video game console, you're in the middle of a game, you get a blackout, you can still save your game because it's running off of the J25. To me, it's totally worth it. If all of that is a no-go, I will say with that big caveat of APC might not cover you if you have a lightning strike and your projector fries, and they might say, we didn't say to plug a projector into this thing. So a huge caveat there, but I wouldn't recommend the CyberPower ones. The Back-UPS, the BE850 in particular, is a decent alternative if that's what you need. Those are my answers.
That makes a lot of sense. You're fitting the budget and the size and everything else.
But get the J25.
I still, I still think you can argue that a projector is computer equipment. Just,
maybe.
So you know what? That was a pretty quick question. I'll hang in here a little longer with you.
Sure, we can do this one last one, and then I'll do a couple more.
I can do a couple more. I can do a couple more. I'm good. Sammy, because that last question, I visually looked at the written question, and it looked like we were going to be at it all day. But
sometimes the length of the question doesn't match the length of the answer. Sometimes
you're exactly
a short
right.
question and a long answer.
I shouldn't assume until I read it. Sammy C. Sammy saw something written on a forum about solid-state equipment warm-up time. Here's a quote. Solid state should be left on all the time. If you have not tried it, do so tonight and see if tomorrow it does not sound more liquid and effortless. Hang on, let me just...
Those are some real objective terms there. On a liquid. Oh yes, my liquid audio. That is, I can measure that with an oscilloscope.
I got a little acid reflux after that. I just... any factual basis for this? No. Or is it total nonsense? Yes.
Well, I mean, I guess if you want to call it factual basis, would be like Class A, pure Class A amplifiers, which are solid state. They don't have to be tube based. They can be, but they don't have to be. It could be a solid state, pure Class A amplifier. And since those are just constantly cycling power, which is why they get crazy hot and are like 10% efficient. You know, like 90% of what goes into it gets turned into heat and 10% gets turned into sound. Yeah. Wonderful. But in that instance, there can be... Should I even bother saying it?
No,
look, objectively, there can be a difference. It does have to like saturate, right? Which in the case of the hours...
I'm just saying, let's not try to make it sound like there's a reasonable answer to this.
Well, I'm just saying, is there any factual basis for this? That's it.
I know what you're saying, and I understand you wanting to be exactly accurate on the basis of some science, but every now and then you got to avoid those kind of technically perfect answers to make sure you're not giving people a reason to believe nonsense. Because people,
for the most part, this is nonsense.
You know how it's nonsense when it says it's going to sound more liquid.
Yeah, liquid, yes. Effortless, yes. Please show me how to measure that. But no, no, please don't, because I'm not interested in finding out what you think.
Measure it in the shower. It's liquid.
Yes, but so the capacitors do need to charge up. Takes about half a second.
Yeah.
So
that's why there's a pause and a click when your amp comes on.
Now, a projector with a lamp. The lamp will warm up. Yeah. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's a lamp.
You don't need to leave it on all the time, though.
No. And you don't want it to look liquid.
Yeah, right. So, okay, almost totally nonsense, but there, I've thrown in the couple of instances where there is such a thing as some warm-up time, but audio equipment like your Class AB amplifier or Class D amplifier, yeah, there is warm-up time. It's about half a second.
There's your technical answer, but the real answer is it's nonsense. Okay, moving on to Jack R. Jack is having a bit of fun by asking this since he already finds reference volume level too loud, which it is for most situations. And realistically, this would never be a concern for him, but he found some forum threads espousing that your subwoofers need to be able to produce more than 125 decibels in your room. They need to be able to produce more than
to have it.
The claim is that the dedicated LFE channel might go as high as 115 decibels. And I guess what? 125 is a bigger number than 115. But then the other speaker channels, even though they are going to be base managed in your home, are still encoded as full range signals. So theoretically, each speaker channel could have a signal containing 105 decibel bass. And then the dedicated LFE channel could theoretically have the same bass frequencies at 115 dB. Add it all up, and your subwoofer might get a signal requesting 127 decibels of output. What? So your subs better be ready for that, or else you won't be getting all the bass, right? Again, here's a great way to end off the podcast, right? Again, Jack's just having a laugh, but any truth to this? Rob, pull out some math on people. I'm going to rub my forehead while you do it.
Well, sure. I mean, okay, so you put two speakers side by side playing the exact same thing. You'll get a plus 6 decibel gain.
Right.
So you do that with two front channels. You do that with two front channels plus a subwoofer output. There's your extra 12 decibels purely theoretically. I know. See, again, you're stuck with a situation where if you want to answer perfectly and technically, it sounds like you're giving people an out to believe nonsense. Right.
But that's not, please listeners, do not equate being super technically accurate as Rob must be.
So I mean, you can even do the thing where in full reference volume in a cinema, okay, not at home, in a cinema, you go to the full reference white paper. There's, white papers about that from Dolby and other companies. They say that the subwoofers need to be able to play in excess of 110 decibels.
Right.
Now, yes, the dedicated LFE channel can have a signal as great as 115 dB that could be in the signal, but in terms of what is reference volume in a full-size cinema, it is the subwoofers being capable of outputting in excess, and that could be 0.1 of a watt more than 110 decibels. So that's what your subwoofers need to be able to produce. They need to be able to produce just slightly in excess of 110. That's the spec. That's it.
Right.
It's all of it. There's no more that you need to go. Now, I mean, this is people wanting to justify buying their JTR subwoofers, their captivators and stuff, and putting it in a 12 by 12 room. They want to justify it. So, okay, knock yourself out. That's fine. You're going to be turning it down. I got subs that, okay, so my PC-13 Ultras, are they capable of doing 127 decibels in my room? I don't know. It might get close, but I have them out of their scale that goes from 0 to 100 on their volume dial. I have them set at 4. So can they do it?
Wait.
Probably
you say
not.
4 out of 100.
Yes, the volume dial goes from 0 to 100. I have them set at 4.
4.
Yeah. So, And they probably can't even do 127 decibels. They probably can't, even in my teeny tiny little room. So no, this is nuts. Is there a theoretical truth? Okay, the numbers can
No, don't do it. Don't do it,
It would be
Rob.
really
No.
poorly mastered audio. Why would you have the exact same sound in all of the speakers and in the dedicated LFE channel all at the same time, all at max? Why would you master something that way? That's ridiculous.
That would be horrible audio tracks.
That is terrible engineering.
Right. So it's not gonna happen.
It's not gonna happen. You really don't need it to happen.
I know Jack's just having a laugh and he wants to hear both of us get our ire up and shake our fists at our webcams.
We're AVRant. It's totally fine. We got to rant about something here in 2019.
Yeah. It's AV laugh really hard in this case. Let's go one more question, man. I don't want to hang in here too much. Those last two went fast because we're just laughing at nonsense, so that didn't feel like much. So one more, because I haven't heard anybody walk in the door yet. Tim bought a Denon X1400H receiver. It's his first time using Odyssey Multi-EQ XT32. Right out of the box, he did his speaker settings manually, physically measuring their distances from his primary seat and measuring their levels with an SPL meter. Then he ran Odyssey, and of course, it changed all the settings.
Yep. That's what it'll do. It'll set all those things automatically.
It'll do it. The auto setup set his front, left, right speakers to large, gave his surround speakers a 40 hertz crossover frequency, and gave his center a 60 hertz crossover. He manually set his front, left, right back to small. Good. Since he has a new SVS subwoofer, also an AVRant recommendation. Excellento. But other than that, should he manually set all the crossovers to 80 hertz? Leave them where the Odyssey auto setup put them? Or what about the 120 hertz setting that rings a bell as something he heard about at some point? My guess would be if it picked 40 or 60, I'd probably set it at 80. There's no need to go higher than that if it picked 40 or 60. That means the microphone heard something lower.
Yeah.
And
it means it was minus 3 decibels at those points that it picked.
Mm-hmm. So am I nuts? Just set all of them to 80 as a starting point? It doesn't hurt to try.
That's really the baseline advice. It's certainly what Tom would say. Move them all to small. Don't leave your front, left, right at large. Don't do that. Set it to small. Move them all to 80 hertz. You're almost certainly going to be fine.
Right.
So that is the baseline advice. Now, that 120 hertz, where did that ring a bell? That is your low pass filter for the dedicated LFE channel. Mm-hmm. That by default is set to 120 hertz. It should stay at 120 hertz, and it should never be anything else. So I don't even know why they allow you to change it, to be honest. There's no reason. That is strictly in the dedicated LFE channel. It should always be 120 hertz, so that's where that figure might have been ringing a bell for you. So you'll see the LPF for LFE. That'll be one of the things. Leave it at 120. The rest, set your speaker to small, give them 80 hertz. Now, the one little thing is my little extra way of doing things, which is you could, if you want to go nuts, play a test tone out of only one speaker at a time, and that might involve physically unplugging and plugging in speakers to do this.
Right.
but you play a bass sweep out of only one speaker at a time, and one by one you play that bass sweep on repeat, and you sit in each of your seats that you care about, and really sort of limit yourself to like a 3 or a 4-seater couch. Don't go nuts if you have a huge area, but within about a 3 or 4-seater couch, you sit in each of those seats while the bass sweep is playing on repeat through just one speaker at a time, and you determine how low that speaker can play before you start to get uneven results, non-uniform results from seat to seat in the bass.
Okay, all right.
And you might discover that that is somewhere a little above or a little below 80 hertz. And if it's a little above 80 hertz, maybe you move the crossover a little higher than 80 hertz to a 90 or 100 hertz or something like that. And
but
if it's a little
for
lower,
smaller speakers.
Not necessarily.
Oh, yeah?
Not necessarily. It could be huge speakers that can actually play all the way down to 20 hertz, but as you move from seat to seat, they start to become non-uniform at, let's say, 90 hertz because of your room.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So if that's the case, you might move it higher. If they can play to 80 hertz or lower, just leave it at 80 hertz, which is why that's the common advice. So you might nudge it a little bit higher if you want to go nuts, but otherwise, small, 80. Low pass filter for LFE, leave it at 120.
It's fascinating to me that most auto setups, no matter the system, like my Yamaha Wipeout said my surrounds were large.
They like to set it to large, and we can't blame Odyssey for that. Odyssey provides the -3 decibel data to whatever manufacturer is using them. Onkyo used to use them; they don't anymore, but they used to. Denon and Marantz are the ones using them now. They provide that, and it's the manufacturers, it's the AV receiver manufacturers who determine what to do with that information. So we can't even blame Odyssey on this. You can blame Denon and Marantz.
Yeah, and Yamaha with theirs. That same thing happens with Wipeout.
Yep.
The distances that Odyssey set for each of his speakers were all quite close to what he had entered manually from his physical measurements, but it set his surround speakers 6 inches or 1 foot farther away. Is that anything to be concerned about? Should he manually change that? Is it due to taking 8 measurements from different mic locations? It may very well be. Again, mine thought that like my right surround speaker was farther away for no reason.
Okay.
And I'm not sure why it did that, and I just couldn't stand it, so I made it match the other one.
So first of all, 6 inches or 1 foot is literally half of or 1 millisecond difference.
Right. Probably not going to be noticeable.
Nah, it's not going to do anything. So I wouldn't worry about 6 inches or 1 foot. That really doesn't matter. It's not due to the 8 measurements because as far as setting the distances, it only takes the very first measurement that you take. That is the only one that it pays attention to when setting the distances for your speakers. So it's not the other mic measurements that are doing that. It could be as simple as when you were holding your SPL meter, you were holding it wherever you were holding it, and where the microphone was set on a tripod was 6 inches difference.
Just a
really
little bit.
Not difficult to imagine that.
Or the angle of it was slightly different. The directionality of it made it read differently.
Sure.
So, yeah.
But I mean, if you're getting 6 inches or 1 foot difference, that is like nothing.
That's a testament to you being accurate with that SPL meter. Really,
that is completely nothing to worry about.
No, not at all. He got the warning that his center speaker might be wired out of phase. He triple checked. Oops, I did a weird thing with scrolling. Sorry, hold on a second. I held down my middle button too long and it does a weird scrolly thing. I'm terribly sorry, everyone. He got that warning that his center speaker might be wired out of phase. He triple checked and it is wired correctly. So he told Odyssey to ignore it and it all seems to work fine. He does have his center positioned on a shelf in his TV stand beneath his TV, just like I do. Is that maybe creating reflections that are causing Odyssey to think it might be out of phase?
It's not impossible.
Maybe.
It's possible. I mean, we've seen lots of these. We had the one fellow who was like, he ran it one time and it told him his left surround speaker was out of phase. He ran it the next time and it told him his right surround speaker was out of phase. But, not both. So, I mean, yeah, this is one of those things where, and I mean, this is why Odyssey even says in their own instructions, if you are certain that it is wired correctly, it is fine to say ignore it and proceed.
I wonder what it's detecting.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I'm not exactly sure why this occurs.
Canceling out exactly where the mic is. It finds one little frequency that's is a teensy little null.
I'm not exactly
right
sure why it does
is.
this. And sometimes you run it again and it doesn't give you the warning. And you literally didn't do anything. You didn't move the mic. All you did was run it again. Sometimes that's just what happens. It could be an extraneous noise. A car drives by. Who knows? It's a little bit mysterious on that. But yes, if you are sure that it is wired correctly, I mean, if you want to be super anal retentive about it, you could actually wire, say, your front left and your center as your front left and right temporarily and play something and make sure that the stereo image does come from exactly between those two speakers.
Yeah. Or just follow your speaker cables carefully and you're probably fine.
I mean, that's in case something got miswired internally inside your speaker by the manufacturer.
Boy, that would be rare.
It's rare, but it has happened. So this is how you test that, right? You literally just set up any two speakers, give them something that plays a stereo image, and make sure that the stereo image is really coming from between them. Then you know that the red is going to the red and the black is going to the black. And if Odyssey tells you might be out of phase, no, you know better, and you're okay, and it's totally fine to ignore it and proceed.
It's okay to trust yourself on occasion.
Yes.
Don't overthink it. Ryan L. Ryan has Ascend CMT340 SE front, center, left, and right speakers, and CBM 170 SE surrounds. Now he wants to expand to Atmos, and he's considering the Boston SoundWare. Is it SoundWare?
It's SoundWare, yes.
SoundWare. I just read that wrong. 4.5. So the Boston SoundWare 4.5 speakers from Accessories for Less.
The ones we've been talking about. Yeah.
We have. And we're showing the picture again on YouTube. But would it be better to save up for Ascend HTM-200SE speakers? Or what about Outdoor Speaker Depot's mountable patio speakers? Well, now you've given us three very different things.
Very different. Yeah, don't go those Outdoor Speaker Depot patio speakers. That's no. And the ones he linked to were like 8-inch woofers. I'm like, that's crazy. You're going to put that on your ceiling? No, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Now, the HTM-200SEs, awesome speakers. They make for great Atmos speakers, but you don't need speakers that good for Atmos. Honestly, I'm totally fine going with those Boston SoundWare 4.5s. $105 for the pair. I mean, heck, try a pair, and if they super duper don't satisfy, you send them back. It's not that big of a risk. If you want something that I also like, there are Kef's E301s, which are little sort of egg-shaped ones that come with an integrated base that can be swiveled around, so you can quite easily mount those on any wall.
I think I've said this about those Kefs before, that they look like what the 1970s thought the future would look like.
Yeah, they do. Look for something out of 2001, don't they? They would fit in that aesthetic.
Yeah, and out of the movie 2001, yes.
That's right, yeah. But yeah, I mean, those actually have been discontinued as well. Mark was even like, can't get any more of those at Accessories for Less. So they're still selling them at Kef Direct. They were on sale over the holidays for $200 a pair, which was a pretty good deal on those, but they're back up to $350 a pair now, and stock is super low. So honestly, get the Bostons. I would totally get those Boston SoundWares. They're like, that's what you want for Atmos speakers. Yeah. Atmos speakers, like, it's so unimportant. As long as they're not garbage, they'll be fine.
Right. I'm starting to get the feeling, the more I hear about Atmos, that it's kind of neato, but no one's freaking out, and kind of use whatever, and just the
day someone genuinely notices a timbre mismatch from their Atmos speakers, are going to be like, well, you are a more critical listener than I, that is for sure.
So yeah, don't worry too much about an Atmos speaker. Let's move on a couple more here. Looks like we had a couple of.
I'm hoping to get 16 was my goal, so that was.
I can do 16. Here's question number 15 from Dave. Can we recommend a cheap but decent and reliable HDMI cable tester? He's got a ton of HDMI cables, and he'd like to be able to sort them according to what bandwidth each of them is able to pass. Well, ask and ye shall receive, right?
Well, not
there is
quite.
Such a thing, isn't there?
Right. Yeah, there's a link because so I mean, this is just Monoprice's one, which they sell for $30, which is an HDMI cable tester. There are other ones from other brands that are right around the same price. I think the cheapest one I saw was about $25. But all these tell you is whether all 19 little twisted pairs inside of that HDMI cable are like physically connected. They're actually sending a signal.
So we don't
through.
know what frequency of signal it's sending.
It doesn't tell you what bandwidth is going through there.
This is a continuity tester.
It's a yeah, perfect, exactly. Okay. Yeah, it's a continuity tester, which is still handy, right? If you're running something long from, like a lot of people use these in satellite setups and stuff like that. It's not a bad thing to have, but it's not what he described, where he's actually trying to find out what bandwidth each of them is passing. Does such a thing exist? Yes. Like, Monster Cable famously, when Audioholics went over there for, a little factory tour, they had their, I think it was like $30,000 device that will test the bandwidth of HDMI cables.
That's a bit high for my budget.
That's what Dave was looking for.
No.
There are, like HDMI professional level things that will test the bandwidth, but all of them are way more expensive than what he's looking for. So I don't have a great answer for you for what you're talking about. You can do the continuity tester. That's fine. It's only $30.
Well, the continuity tester, at least, if you have a shorter cable, I'd say 10 feet or less, and that continuity tester says they're all connected, it's probably going to carry the frequencies you want.
Right. And if you know cable, it was... high speed certified. You can be very sure it's going to pass 10.2 gigabits per second. Will it pass the full 18? I mean, that's kind of what he wants to know.
Right.
So really the only way I would recommend a consumer do this is use a device like a PC or an NVIDIA Shield or something where you can manually set the output to something like 4K, 60 hertz, 444 or RGB, 12-bit, right? Ooh. Because if you can set it to all that, now you have to have a display on the other end of that is capable of accepting such a signal.
Right.
So that's a question mark too, because I don't know what TV Dave is using to connect this to, but let's say it's an LG OLED, which can accept all of that, a 4K, 60 hertz, RGB or 444, 12-bit signal. That will be in excess of 10.2 gigabits per second. So if it works, and I mean, literally just the menus or your Windows desktop, that's all you need. If that works without any sparklies or without any little dropouts or anything like that, then it's capable of passing more than 10.2 gigabits per second.
So there's really no simple answer other than when it comes time, just try each cable.
How horrible is that, right?
I know, right?
And it requires that you have both a player and a display capable of sending out and accepting a signal of that, that kind of bandwidth. But I don't have a great answer. I don't have some $50 device that you can plug it into and it'll give you some green lights and tell you really quick. Not for the bandwidth. For the continuity, exactly as Lee described, $30 will get you there, or even $25 probably, but not the bandwidth.
Sometimes there's just not a good answer.
Not for that.
Because not a lot of people need that capability, so that kind of object
I wish there were something a lot better than just like plugging it into your display and your source device and seeing if it works.
Trying it,
it's not a great test.
Yeah, but that's all we really have.
It's all we kind of have
as regular mere
mortals.
Yes. Mike G on Twitter. Over Christmas, Mike decided to hook a Nintendo Wii backup to his system. He has the component video output cable, so he plugged that into his Yamaha RX A760 receiver, which should be able to convert component video into HDMI. Then he's got his Yamaha's HDMI output connected to an HDMI to Ethernet adapter for a long cable run over to his TV. He was getting sound, but no picture. What's the deal?
So we did sort this out over the holidays via Twitter.
Okay, all right.
And the reason I wanted to bring this up is there are a significant number of AV receivers now, and not like super entry level. I'm talking, mid-level receivers that no longer convert analog video to HDMI. That is a feature I have seen gone missing from a lot of models, even mid-tier models. That feature is going missing. Not the case in his RX A760. It does have component video to HDMI conversion, but it has something that none of us expected, which is it'll only do it at 480i or 576i if you're in the UK.
What?
It won't do it at 480p. It won't do it at 720p or 1080p. It'll only do it at 480 or 576i, even via component. So the reason he bought component video cables for his Wii, because it didn't come with them, it just came with a yellow composite cable.
Yeah, just 480p.
You had to separately buy component video, was so to do 480p. So naturally, that's what he had it set as. The A760 Yamaha won't convert 480p to HDMI. So he set it to 480i, like his Wii. He set his Wii to 480i, still with component video, which even at 480i still looks better than composite. And it worked. It worked. And it was in the manual. It was on page 146 of the manual before you found any mention of it. So that was fun.
Well, I better double check then when it comes time to getting myself a new Yamaha receiver and read the manual and make sure, because I have at least, I like my cable box right now. Guess what? Its HDMI died. The output from my cable box, the HDMI died. So I'm going to have to use the component for a while. I still have lots of stuff I need to watch off that DVR and copy off of that DVR. You kind of get stuck and I can't just take it back to them. I'll lose a bunch of stuff. And so I'm thinking I need to be able to use, I guess I could plug it straight into the TV for a while. But man, analog's going away fast. We talked about that with the whole conversion of old low def analog to digital. Analog anything is just fading away quickly.
Well, if you look at the back of, I actually kind of wanted to mention this here right at the end, Emotiva's RMC1, that pre-pro that they put out that does 9.1.6 for $5,000 and includes, the hilarious thing is it doesn't include Dirac Live yet because that's going to be coming via an update.
Everything's
Who
always
knows
coming
when.
later.
But there are actually some people who received them. So credit to Emotiva.
Hey!
RMC ones are a real thing. You can't get one right now, although they're selling the next batch of pre-orders. Who knows when that'll be. And it doesn't run to rack yet, but the whole thing that made me think of it is if you look on the back of it, it has no analog video inputs at all. It's only HDMI now. So I wanted to bring that up because this is a thing where you can't take for granted that even a mid-tier or fairly high-end AV receiver is definitely going to convert analog video to HDMI anymore. You can't take that as a given. So you got to read the manual. And yeah, super unexpected, but only 480i. What a weird thing.
That is weird because I think my 2014 one will do that.
Oh, more than likely. It'll probably do 1080p.
Yeah, I think it will. I think it'll, I know it'll do. Yeah, I think so. So that is strange. I'm going to skip out on you now, Rob.
That's absolutely fine. Yeah, if you need to go, that's fine.
16 questions. Look at that. 16.
That's what I was hoping to hit. So I'll just quickly mention we've got Luke H, Leighton M, Brian F, Fab F, and we got one more, Brandon N. You are on the list. Also got questions from Justin B, Ted M, and J A.
Goodness gracious.
Filled in yet. Those came in late.
The questions piled in at the holidays, didn't they?
Oh, for sure. Well, we took a week off. This is what happens on
right.
AVRant. But yes, we answer your AV and home theater questions. You can send those to question@avrant.com. That's our email address. Also, look us up on our website, avrant.com. So yeah, that's going to be it. Thank you so much, Lee, for filling in. That's awesome that you were.
You're very welcome. You know I enjoy it. I try to do this anytime I can. I may not be always the best informed because we had friends over last night and things to do this morning and family showing up in just a second.
So, but you can tell if we had taken another week off, the backlog would have been insurmountable. So
yeah, right.
That is no good.
We would have had to do like 2 episodes at once, like one in the left channel and one in the right channell, and you just go turn your balance left to right to listen to one question or the other. Yeah, just go left right. We could do it in quad and do 4 questions at once. It's amazing.
I think we could actually just release 2 podcasts. That seems like a thing that can be done in the digital age. But yeah, no, that's awesome. Going to thank our listeners of the week. That's our 73 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast, including Gib G. If you want to donate via PayPal instead, come to avrant.com. Over on the right-hand side, there's the support the podcast button over there. And want to thank James C., who did give an Amazon gift card to Tim as well as to me. Tim. Where did Tim come from? Tom, as well as
Tom is already fading away. I've been here 2 weeks in a row, and we're forgetting who Tom is.
He's the picture in Back to the Future.
Tim, something? Yeah, he's a fading picture.
Thank you to everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to
2019. Yay.
On behalf of Tom Andrew, I'm Rob H.
And I'm Lee Overstreet. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.